Have you ever felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking your every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? I never thought I'd know that terror, not in the quiet solitude of northern Utah, where I lived on the edge of a forgotten highway town. The place was a ghost of civilization. Nothing but a few tired stores, a couple of truck stops, and a motel that looked like it hadn't seen a guest in years, all clinging to the main highway like a lifeline. Beyond that, dirt roads stretched into the wilderness, winding past scattered homes and sprawling acres of forest and grassy fields that seemed to swallow the world whole. The air always carried a faint chill, even in summer, as if the pines held on to secrets they'd never whisper. It was a day like any other, or so I thought. I worked remotely, my laptop a tether to the outside world, and by 6 in the evening I'd wrapped up my tasks. The fading light painted the sky in hues of amber and gray, urging me to head into town for groceries. I needed a few things for the house. Nothing urgent, just the usual restocking of pantry staples. The highway town was never busy, its pulse slow and steady, so the stores were rarely crowded. I drove the familiar route, the dirt roads crunching under my tires, the forest looming on either side like a silent sentinel. The store was a beacon of light in the growing dusk, its fluorescent glow spilling onto the cracked pavement outside. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of packaged goods and cleaning supplies, a sterile comfort I'd grown used to. I grabbed a cart, its wheels squeaking faintly as I moved through the aisles, checking items off my mental list. But then I felt it, a cold prickle on the back of my neck, like a shadow passing over my soul. I turned, my eyes catching a man across the aisle. He stood there motionless, his face half hidden under a worn cap, his gaze locked on me. His eyes were hollow, devoid of warmth, like twin voids that seemed to pull the light from the room. I told myself it was nothing, just an awkward moment where our glances had collided. I forced a small smile, more for myself than him, and turned, back to the shelves, my fingers tightening around a can of soup as I tried to shake the unease. But minutes later, in a different aisle, he was there again. The store felt smaller now, the aisles narrowing as if the walls were closing in. He stood just 5 or 6 feet away, his hands empty, his body unnaturally still. I kept my eyes forward, scanning the shelves for something I didn't even need. But I could feel his stare, a weight that pressed against my skin. My heart thudded in my chest, a dull rhythm that drowned out the hum of the store's lights. I shifted my gaze slightly, just enough to see him in my peripheral vision. He wasn't moving, wasn't shopping, just staring. Feel the chill now, the way it seeps into your bones, whispering that something's wrong. I murmured a "hi," my voice barely above a whisper, hoping to break the spell. But he didn't respond. His silence was a void, a black hole that swallowed my words and left me colder than before. I hurried to grab the last items, my movements jerky, and made my way to the checkout. The cashier's cheerful chatter felt like a lifeline, pulling me back to reality as I paid for my groceries. I forced myself to focus on her words, on the crinkle of the plastic bags, on anything but the man. But as I stepped outside, the world tilted. The parking lot stretched before me, a sea of asphalt under a sky bruised with twilight. I'd parked at the far end, a habit to avoid door dings, but now it felt like a mistake. As I loaded my bags into the trunk, I glanced up, and there he was. He stood between 2 cars, maybe 50 yards away, his hands empty, his gaze fixed on me. No groceries, no bags, just watching. My stomach twisted into knots, a primal fear clawing at my insides. Was he a trucker, strung out on too little sleep? I slid into my car, locking the doors with trembling hands, and pulled onto the highway. The dirt roads home were shrouded in darkness, their edges blurring into the forest, and I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights trailing me. I reached my house, a solitary outpost on 40 acres of land, and parked out front. The familiar sound of gravel under my tires was a small comfort, but the unease lingered like a bitter aftertaste. I carried in the first bags, setting them on the counter, my movements mechanical. A call from my dad interrupted me, his voice warm and grounding as we talked about mundane things. Work, the weather, a recipe he wanted to try, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the man's hollow eyes, the way he'd stood so still. I ended the call and stepped outside to grab the rest of the groceries, but the night stopped me cold. Far down the dirt road, barely visible in the inky darkness, was a truck. No lights, no movement, just a hulking shape silhouetted against the starless sky. Imagine standing there, the night pressing in, knowing something's wrong but not what. It was on my land, a place where no one should be. Had it been there when I arrived? I squinted, my eyes straining to make sense of the shape, but it remained a silent, ominous presence. I told myself it was nothing. A lost driver, too cheap for a motel, looking for a place to sleep. But the thought felt hollow, a lie I couldn't quite believe. My hands shook as I grabbed the last bags, my eyes darting to the truck, its stillness more threatening than any motion. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me, the sound of the deadbolt a small reassurance. I opened the front curtains, telling myself it was to keep watch, not because fear was gnawing at my insides. For the next hour, I sat in the living room, a show playing on the TV, its canned laughter a stark contrast to the tension coiling in my chest. My eyes kept drifting to the window, to the spot where the truck sat, unmoving. You're safe here, you tell yourself, but the dark outside knows better. Slowly, the panic ebbed, replaced by a fragile calm. It was just a driver, I decided. Harmless, despite the oddity. I closed the curtains and went upstairs to bed, the creak of the stairs echoing in the quiet house. Sleep came quickly, a merciful escape from the day's unease. But at some ungodly hour, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, a jolt ripped me awake. I needed the bathroom, my body moving on autopilot as my mind struggled to shake the fog of sleep. The house was a cocoon of darkness, the only light a faint sliver of moonlight seeping through the kitchen windows below. My bare feet padded across the bedroom floor, the wood cool against my skin. I opened the door to the hallway, and a faint noise stopped me dead. A soft groan from downstairs, like the house itself was protesting under an unseen weight. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, ears straining for any sound. Had I imagined it? I closed the door and opened it again, testing, but the noise didn't repeat. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my skull as I crept to the end of the hallway and peered down the stairs. The darkness below was absolute, broken only by that faint moonlight, painting the walls in ghostly grays. And then I saw it, a shadow shifting ever so slightly like a predator holding its breath. My blood turned to ice, my body rooted to the spot. Was it inside, or just a trick of the light from outside? Feel your heart race now, the way it drowns. Reason. I backed into my room, easing the door shut with agonizing care, every movement deliberate to avoid notice. My phone was a lifeline, my fingers trembling as I dialed the police, my voice barely a whisper as I explained the situation. For 5 endless minutes, I waited, the silence a suffocating weight. I doubted myself. Maybe it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But then it came again. Slow, deliberate steps, crossing the floor below, moving toward the living room. Each one was a dagger to my nerves, proof that I wasn't alone. The sound was methodical, unhurried, as if whoever was down there knew I had nowhere to run. Suddenly, lights flashed outside, red and blue, slicing through the darkness like a beacon of hope. Footsteps erupted downstairs, frantic now, fleeing as the police stormed in. I stayed frozen, my breath shallow, until an officer's voice called up, assuring me it was safe. They'd caught him, sprinting toward that truck in the field, his escape cut short. And when they brought him into the light, my world shattered. It was him, the man from the store, his hollow eyes unmistakable, burning with a malice I couldn't comprehend. He carried a knife, its blade gleaming with intent, clutched like an extension of his arm. He claimed it was just a robbery, but the lie was thin, a flimsy mask over something far darker. He'd taken nothing, carried no bag, and knew I was home. He'd been watching me all night from the shadows. His true purpose, a nightmare I'll never know. The thought haunts me still, a lingering dread that follows me into the dark. Night had swallowed the world, leaving only the hum of my tires on a forgotten road. I was alone, miles from anywhere, chasing the promise of rest in a stranger's cabin. The pines loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows dancing in my headlights. Something about this place felt alive, watchful, as if the forest itself knew I didn't belong. I gripped the wheel tighter, unaware that I was driving toward a terror that would haunt me forever. The summer evening was heavy with the scent of pine and earth as I pulled into the gravel driveway. The cabin sat at the end of a winding path, framed by rows of towering trees that seemed to lean inward, guarding it from the world. It was 6 p.m., the sky bruised with twilight. My phone buzzed with the host's email, a simple code for the padlock. I punched it in, the lock yielding with a soft click, and stepped inside. The cabin was a haven of warmth. Polished wood floors, a plush couch, a faint glow from a lamp in the corner. It felt like a refuge, a place to shed the weight of my 8-hour drive. I dropped my bag, sank into a chair, and exhaled. For a moment the world was still, but stillness can be deceptive. Barely 10 minutes had passed when a sharp knock jolted me upright. My heart stumbled. No car, no footsteps, just that sound. The silence before it had been absolute, the kind that presses against your ears. I sat frozen, my eyes fixed on the door, its dark wood suddenly ominous. Who could be here? This was nowhere, a speck in the wilderness. Slowly I stood, my legs unsteady, as if the floor itself resisted me. I approached the door, my hand trembling on the knob, and opened it. A man stood on the porch, his figure filling the frame. He was maybe 40, with a gray-flecked beard and a shaved head that gleamed faintly in the porch light. His smile was too wide, too perfect, like something rehearsed in a mirror. "Evening," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge, like a blade wrapped in silk. "Just making sure you got in all right. Everything okay?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, it's fine, thanks for checking." His eyes lingered, sweeping over me, the cabin, the shadows behind me. A sour smell hit me. Sweat, dirt, something primal, like he'd been toiling in the earth all day. It clung to the air, invasive. I forced a smile, mumbled a good night, and shut the door, sliding the lock into place with a thud. My pulse hammered in my ears. He's just the host, I told myself. Lives nearby, probably, doing his job. But the words felt hollow. I returned to the table, my burger cold and forgotten. The cabin's warmth now felt stifling, the walls too close, as if they were closing in. I tried to shake it off. Exhaustion, that's all it was. I'd been driving too long. My nerves frayed. A shower would clear my head. The bathroom was small, the tiles cool under my feet. As the water poured over me, steam rose in curls, blurring the world. but my mind kept circling back to him. His smile, his eyes, that smell. Why didn't I hear him approach? I cut the shower short, the unease gnawing deeper. Wrapping a towel around me, I stepped into the bedroom. The cabin was too quiet now, the silence a living thing, watching. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers tight, and opened my phone, desperate for distraction. Scrolling through mindless posts, I tried to anchor myself in the familiar. Then it came again. Another knock, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the night. My breath caught, a scream trapped in my chest. I sat up, the phone slipping from my hands. The knocks came again, louder, insistent, each one a hammer against my nerves. It's him. Why is he back? I checked my phone. No texts, no calls from the host. Nothing to explain this. The cabin felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the air thick with dread. I slid out of bed, my bare feet silent on the floor, and crept to the main room. The knocks continued, relentless, shaking the door in its frame. My voice trembled as I called out, "What do you want?" A pause, heavy and suffocating. Then his voice low, almost a growl. "Open the door. Just need to ask you something. It'll be quick." My stomach churned. Something's wrong. This isn't right. I stood rooted, my hand hovering over the lock, every instinct screaming to stay back. "It's late," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "If it's not an emergency, please leave me alone." Silence. A silence so deep it felt like drowning. I strained to hear, footsteps, breathing, anything. But the world was mute. Is he gone? I edged toward the door's small window, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would betray me. I peered out, the porch bathed in shadow. Empty. Relief flickered, fragile and fleeting. I turned, ready to retreat, when a shadow shifted across the living room window. Eyes. His eyes locked on mine, burning through the glass. Panic erupted. A wildfire in my veins. I stumbled back, my phone shaking as I fumbled for 911. "Someone's trying to get in," I whispered to the operator, my voice breaking. Outside, a faint scrape, fingers testing the window's edge, searching for weakness. He's circling, hunting. My mind raced, piecing together the truth. He's not the host. He never was. The realization was a knife, cold and sharp. I crouched behind the couch, the cabin no longer a refuge but a cage. Every sound was magnified. The wind's low moan, the creak of the floor, my own ragged breaths. "What does he want?" The question clawed at me unanswered. I saw his face again in my mind, that smile, those eyes, not human but predatory, like something wearing a man's skin. The cabin's walls seemed to pulse, the air thick with his presence, as if he'd seeped inside. I clutched the phone, the operator's voice a distant lifeline. Minutes stretched into eternity, each second a battle to stay silent, to stay unseen. Then, salvation, sirens, faint at first, growing louder. Headlights pierced the darkness, flooding the driveway. I heard shouts, boots on gravel, the sweep of flashlights. I dared to peek out, seeing officers combing the property, their beams cutting through the night. He was gone, vanished like smoke. I unlocked the door, my hands trembling, and spilled my story to the police. They contacted the real host, who confirmed the truth. No one had been sent to check on me. The cabin was empty, the man a phantom with no trace. The cabin stood silent now, but its warmth was a lie. I packed my things, my movements frantic, the walls watching me. I left before dawn, the gravel crunching under my tires as I fled. The police found nothing. No footprints, no signs, just my word against the night. But I know he was there, his eyes etched into my soul. What did he want? The question follows me, a shadow in every quiet place, a whisper in every darkened room. I drive on, but the road feels endless and the night is never far behind. It was as if the forest had eyes that night, boring into me through the endless rows of pine trees. I was 18, standing on a rotting porch in the heart of Minnesota's wilderness, my breath catching in the cold spring air. The stars above were sharp, but the darkness below felt alive, pulsing with a hunger I couldn't name. You can almost feel it now, the weight of unseen gazes, the forest holding its breath, waiting to unleash its secret. That was the night I learned a single flame could summon a monster, that the glow of warmth could draw a blade from the shadows. The idea of leaving the city had felt like a dream. My mom, my 7-year-old brother and I had piled into our old sedan, driving 10 hours from the neon hum of skyscrapers to this forgotten corner of Minnesota. We were on a spring break mission to scout small towns, to find a place where life moved slower, where we could trade concrete for open skies. The cabin we rented was our test, a week to see if we could handle the quiet of rural life. But as we pulled up at sunset, the forest's dense embrace felt less like freedom and more like a warning. The cabin squatted low, its weathered logs stained dark, as if the trees themselves had claimed it. The orange sky bled into the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to slink toward us. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule of neglect. Floorboards groaned under every step, and the air carried the musty scent of damp wood. A wood-burning fireplace sat in the corner, its blackened maw exhaling faint traces of ash. My brother clung to Mom's hand, his small face tight with unease, as he scanned the flickering shadows. I forced a smile, trying to bury my own discomfort. We were tired, our bodies heavy from the drive, so we settled in quickly. Mom lit the fireplace, its flames dancing with a fragile warmth that barely reached the room's edges. By 8:30, she was tucking my brother into bed, her soft voice humming a lullaby that felt out of place in the cabin's hollow silence. I'd napped during the drive, so I wasn't ready to sleep. Instead, I wandered to the back porch, drawn to the vastness of the night. The porch was a rickety platform, its wooden planks warped by years of rain. A fire pit sat in the center, surrounded by splintered chairs that looked ready to collapse. I sank into one, gazing out at the forest. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches knitting together to block the starlight. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or a distant bird's cry. It was beautiful in a way, raw, untouched, a world apart from the city's chaos. But beneath the calm, a faint unease stirred, like the forest was whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I shook it off, spotting a stack of logs piled against the cabin's wall. A fire seemed like the perfect way to claim this space, to push back the dark. I arranged the wood in the pit, coaxing flames to life. They rose quickly, their golden light spilling across the porch, painting the trees in fleeting warmth. For a moment, I felt at peace, the fire's gentle hiss a companion in the solitude. Then, the night turned. A sound sliced through the stillness, a heavy, deliberate thud, like a blade sinking into wood. It came from the forest, close enough to make my heart lurch. I froze, my eyes darting to the trees, but the darkness swallowed everything beyond the fire's glow. Was someone out there? Hidden in the shadows, swinging an axe in the dead of night. The thought felt absurd, yet the silence that followed was worse, thick, oppressive, as if the forest was holding its breath. I waited, every nerve taut, but no other sound came. My hands trembled as I smothered the flames, the fire's death leaving me in near total darkness. I retreated inside, locking the door with a shaking hand. the bolt's metallic click sounding too frail against the vastness outside. Back in the living room, I tried to anchor myself in the familiar. Mom and my brother were asleep, their steady breaths a reminder of safety. I sank onto the couch, pulling out my phone to scroll through downloaded movies. The cabin's walls sighed occasionally, their groans blending with the wind's low moan. I told myself the thud was nothing, an animal, a falling branch, but its echo lingered, a splinter in my mind. I chose a movie, hoping the noise would drown out my unease, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows where the forest's blackness pressed against the glass. Then a new sound, soft, deliberate like footsteps crunching in the dirt outside. I paused the movie, my pulse quickening. Was it my imagination? The sound came again, closer, from the wall just beyond the couch. I leaned toward the window, my breath fogging the glass, but saw only my own reflection staring back, pale and wide-eyed. The forest beyond was a void, its secrets buried in shadow. Before I could pull away, a violent pounding erupted at the front door, shaking the cabin's frail frame. The force of it stole my breath, each blow a hammer against my nerves. I stumbled to my feet, my legs unsteady, as Mom rushed into the hallway, her voice sharp with fear. "What's happening?" she whispered, her eyes wide in the dim light. I crept to the door, my heart pounding so fiercely I thought it might burst. Through the peephole I saw him, a man, his silhouette stark against the faint moonlight. He stood too close, his head tilted as if listening, one hand gripping a heavy wooden axe. Its blade caught the starlight, glinting with a cold, merciless promise. The air grew heavy, as if the cabin itself sensed the violence to come. I turned to Mom, my voice barely a whisper. "He's got an axe." Her face drained of color, and she fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed 911. The man pounded again, each strike a thunderclap in the silence, the door trembling under his assault. My brother's small voice called out from his room, laced with terror. I wanted to scream, to demand why this stranger was here, but fear clamped my throat shut. Then a sickening crack split the air. The axe's blade tore through the door, splintering wood in a shower of fragments. The sight of that blade, jagged and real, shattered any hope of this being a mistake. My brother's sob broke through my paralysis. "Run!" I hissed, grabbing his hand as we fled, Mom close behind. We piled into the farthest room, a cramped storage space with a flimsy lock. I slammed the door, pressing my body against it, every nerve screaming as the axe struck again, each blow a countdown to disaster. We huddled in the dark, my brother trembling in Mom's arms, her whispers a desperate attempt to soothe him. My back pressed against the door. I felt every vibration of the axe's assault, each hit chipping away at my courage. After 4 or 5 blows, the pounding stopped, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like a trap. Was he inside, creeping through the shadows? Had he given up? The uncertainty gnawed at me worse than the noise. My mind conjured images of him standing just outside, axe raised, waiting for us to emerge. Time stretched into eternity, each second a battle against panic until headlights pierced the window. Salvation. An officer's voice called out, calm but urgent, urging us to open the door. I hesitated, fear still gripping me, but Mom pushed past, unlocking the room with trembling hands. Stepping into the living room, I saw the front door scarred with deep gashes, the axe's marks etched like a predator's claws. Splinters littered. The floor and the air smelled of raw wood and fear. The man was gone, vanished into the forest's embrace, leaving no trace but the havoc he'd wrought. The officers swept the cabin, their flashlights cutting through the dark, but found only churned earth near the porch and a trail of disturbed leaves leading nowhere. They questioned us, their voices steady but grim. "That fire pit you lit," one said, nodding toward the porch. "It was probably visible for miles. Could have drawn him in." The words landed like a stone in my gut. My attempt to claim the night, to find comfort in the flames, had summoned this nightmare. We packed in a daze, our belongings stuffed into bags as dawn's first light crept through the trees. The cabin, once a symbol of possibility, now felt like a cage, its walls too thin to keep the forest's hunger at bay. We drove away, the gravel crunching under our tires, the forest's shadows stretching long behind us. Minnesota's promise of a new life died that night, buried beneath the weight of what we'd survived. The police never found him, and their theory that the fire's glow had lured a drifter or worse offered no comfort. Who was he? Why an axe? The questions haunted me, each one a blade of its own, cutting deeper with time. Years later, I still can't light a fire without feeling the forest's eyes, without hearing the echo of that axe-biting wood, without wondering if he's still out there, waiting for another spark to guide him. In the heart of last January, the snow draped my small home in a woodsy town like a shroud, hiding secrets in its silent folds. My house, a modest refuge 45 minutes from the city's clamor, stood at the end of a long driveway, swallowed by towering pines that whispered in the winter wind. I'd just finished a half-day at work, the kind that leaves your mind free to wander, and I was savoring the promise of a quiet evening. The living room glowed softly, the couch cradling me as I scrolled through my phone, the world outside reduced to a gentle flurry of snowflakes catching the porch light. Around 7 p.m., the phone's sharp ring cut through the calm, jarring me upright. It was a friend, his voice tight with urgency, pleading for a ride home. His car had betrayed him again. I agreed without a second thought. This wasn't the first time I'd played rescuer. The familiarity of his request grounded me, but as I reached for my jacket in the closet, a strange weight settled in the air, like the house was watching me move. The keys felt colder than usual, biting into my palm, and I paused by the front door, a flicker of unease brushing my spine. What if the night isn't as safe as it seems? My mind wandered to a tale my neighbor once shared, about a drifter who roamed these woods years ago, leaving only footprints before vanishing. I shook it off, blaming the winter chill for my nerves, and gripped the doorknob. The porch light cast a frail glow, illuminating snowflakes that danced like ghosts in the dark. This was just another ordinary night, I told myself, but something deep inside whispered that I was wrong, that the world beyond my door was holding its breath, waiting to unravel. I opened the door and the night bared its teeth. A man stood on my porch, inches away, his heavy coat blending into the shadows, a black scarf cloaking half his face. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, pinned me in place, untouched by the shock that jolted through me. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, as if he'd been carved from the darkness itself. My heart pounded, embarrassment warring with a primal instinct that screamed something was wrong. This wasn't a neighbor, not in a place where houses hid behind long driveways and strangers were as rare as sunlight in January. Before I could find my voice, he spoke, low and measured, apologizing for startling me, claiming he was about to knock. The words felt rehearsed, like a mask he wore to hide something else. I forced a steady tone, asking what he wanted. He hesitated, then asked if I was David or Daryl, some name that didn't belong to me. I shook my head, muttering no, and he nodded, saying only, "Okay," before turning away. His boots left deep prints in the snow, each step a pulse in, my ears urging me to watch him fade into the night. I locked the door, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline, and waited, breath held, until his shadow melted into the trees. Why was he here, so close, in a place where no one comes uninvited. The question gnawed at me as I climbed into my car, the cold leather seat grounding me. My neighbor's story echoed again. A drifter, a shadow in the woods, never caught. I drove toward my friend's workplace, the stranger's eyes lingering in my mind like a stain, his presence a riddle wrapped in dread. This wasn't over, some part of me knew, and the night was only beginning to show its true face. The road to my friend's workplace stretched dark and quiet, but the stranger's gaze haunted every turn. What kind of man stands so still, so close in a neighborhood where driveways snake through woods for miles? My home was a fortress of solitude, hidden from passers-by, not a place for random visitors. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe he was lost, seeking someone else. But the memory of his unblinking eyes twisted in my gut, a warning I couldn't ignore. I picked up my friend, his chatter about his car a fleeting distraction, and we grabbed burgers at Culver's, the neon lights a brief shield against the night's unease. By 9 p.m., I was back, the snow falling thicker now, cloaking the driveway in a deceptive veil. The house greeted me with warmth, but it felt fragile, like a dream poised to shatter. I locked the door, the bolts click a small comfort, and sank onto the couch, the TV's hum filling the silence. Hours slipped away, maybe 2, as I drowned, my thoughts in flickering shows trying to bury the stranger's shadow. But as I rose to head upstairs, a prickle of instinct stopped me cold by the front door. Something was out there, waiting, watching through the snow. My neighbor's tale surfaced again. The drifter who left only footprints, a ghost in the forest. I shook my head, blaming fatigue, but the unease clung like frost. The porch light glowed faintly, casting the driveway in a pale haze. This was my home, my sanctuary. But tonight it felt like a stage, and I was no longer alone in the script. I pressed my face to the peephole, the porch empty, snow swirling under the dim light. Then I saw them, shoe prints fresh and sharp slicing through the snow like a blade. They trailed up the driveway, past my car, and vanished into the shadowed yard where the pines stood like sentinels. My breath caught, pulse hammering in my ears. These weren't old tracks. They were carved in the fresh snow that had fallen since I'd returned. If this was the stranger, he hadn't left. He was circling my home, a predator marking its prey. My hands shook as I dialed 911, my voice barely steady as I whispered about the prints, the man on my porch, the dread pooling in my chest. The operator's calm questions felt like they came from another world, distant and unreal. As I leaned against the window, eyes straining into the dark. Something stirred out there. A flicker of movement, like a breath in the night. I froze, ears straining, but the sound vanished when I focused, leaving only silence. Doubt crept in. Maybe I was losing it. But then a faint rustle broke through, sharp and deliberate, teasing my nerves. "You're not imagining this," I told myself, clinging to the fear like a lifeline. My neighbor's story echoed louder now. The drifter who left no trace but footprints, a shadow never caught. I stayed by the window, phone pressed to my ear, the cold glass chilling my forehead. The night was alive, watching me, and I was no longer safe in my own home. The operator's voice droned on, but my focus was outside, where the snow hid secrets and the trees whispered of things unseen. I prayed the police would come before the darkness revealed what it was hiding. Then it happened. A brutal thud shook, the back of the house rattling the walls like a beast demanding entry. My phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands, my breath trapped in my chest. I stumbled into the hallway, heart racing, as another thud landed, heavier, more deliberate, shaking the very foundation of my home. Through the glass of the back door, A shadow moved, vague but alive, its presence a violation that turned my sanctuary into a trap. The operator's voice, urgent now, told me to hide or flee. But hiding felt like surrender to whatever lurked. Outside, I gripped my keys, the metal digging into my palm, and made a choice. I threw open the front door, the icy air hitting me like a wave, the driveway a gauntlet of snow and shadows. My boots slipped on the frozen path, each step a gamble as I sprinted to the car. What if he's not alone? What if someone's waiting, in the dark? The thought clawed at me, but I reached the car, slamming the door and jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared, tires spinning before catching the road, and I sped away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. But the fear stayed, a passenger I couldn't outrun. Police arrived later, their flashlights revealing a nightmare. The back door battered open, splintered wood scattered across the floor, watery footprints pooling in the hallway like a ghost's trail. No one was there, the intruder gone, vanished into the woods that guarded their secrets. I described the man from the porch, his scarf, his eyes, but there was no proof he was the one. If it was him, he'd been watching me, waiting, and I'd only escaped by chance. My neighbor's story haunted me now. The drifter who left footprints and nothing else, a warning woven into my own terror. Those prints still haunt my dreams, leading nowhere, promising he's still out there. The police found no trace, no answers, only the shattered remains of my safety. This happened on an ordinary day, a day like any other, and that's what terrifies me most. My home, once a refuge, now feels like a stage for a play I didn't choose. I lie awake at night, listening for the next thud, knowing it could come again, any time, any day, and I'll never be ready. That's the nightmare I lived through in 2019, a year that should have been filled with the carefree days of college life. I was a sophomore, juggling classes and a side gig as a babysitter to chip away at the payments for my beat-up car. 3 or 4 nights a week, I'd find myself in quiet suburban homes, watching over sleeping kids while their parents slipped away for a few hours. It was easy money, a routine I'd grown comfortable with, until that one night shattered everything. I thought I knew about safety. For about a month, I'd been watching a 3-year-old boy once a week. His parents were the soft-spoken type, their voices always gentle, their smiles warm but reserved. They'd leave around bedtime, entrusting their son to my care for 4 or 5 hours, while they disappeared into the night. I never asked where they went. Curiosity felt intrusive, but I vaguely recalled them mentioning a trip to the city once, perhaps for a date night. That evening, I pulled into their driveway at 8, the sky already a deep indigo, the streetlights casting pools of pale light on the pavement. The house was a modest 2-story, nestled in a sleepy neighborhood where the hum of crickets was louder than any passing car. I knocked softly, and the parents greeted me with their usual quiet gratitude, mentioning that the boy was already asleep in his room. They thanked me, their voices a soothing murmur, and slipped out into the night, leaving me alone with the stillness of the house. I set my bag down in the entryway, the faint scent of lavender air freshener lingering in the air, and did my usual walk through. The house felt familiar now, its layout etched into my memory. The creaky spot on the stairs, the glow of a nightlight in the boy's room, the soft ticking of a clock in the kitchen. Everything was as it should be. The boy sleeping peacefully under a blanket patterned with stars, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I settled into a chair in the living room, the cushions sinking beneath me, and pulled out my phone to pass the time. The parents always encouraged me to make myself at home, watch TV, cook dinner, whatever I wanted, but I preferred the quiet distraction of my screen, occasionally glancing toward the hallway to ensure the boy was still asleep. The house was a cocoon of calm, the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. Or so I thought. Less than an hour into my shift, my phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with the mother's number. I answered immediately, expecting a quick check-in, but her voice carried a note of confusion that sent a flicker of unease through me. She asked if I'd just called her tone hesitant, almost apologetic. I assured her I hadn't, my brows furrowing as I explained I was still at the house and had no reason to call. She mentioned receiving a call from an unsaved number, but when she answered, there was only silence on the other end. She wondered if I'd gotten a new phone or if the call had somehow dropped, her words tinged with a concern I couldn't quite place. I reassured her everything was fine, my voice steady despite the oddity of the situation, and she thanked me before hanging up. "You've felt this before, haven't you? That moment when the ordinary becomes a puzzle you can't solve." I brushed it off, chalking it up to a worried parent's overthinking. I checked on the boy again, his small form still tucked beneath the blanket, the nightlight casting a soft glow on his peaceful face. I returned to my chair, sinking back into the cushions, my phone screen pulling me back into a video I'd been watching. About 20 minutes later, a sudden light pierced the darkness. Headlights streamed through the cracks in the living room blinds, their harsh glow slicing across the walls like a blade. I froze, my heart giving a startled thud, before rationalizing that it must be a neighbor pulling into their driveway. But as the seconds ticked by, the light didn't fade, lingered, unyielding, as if the car outside was idling with purpose. I stood, my movement slow, and approached the window, peeling back the blinds just enough to peek outside. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. A dark gray sedan sat by the curb, its frame old and rusted, the windows so heavily tinted they seemed to swallow the streetlight's glow. I stared at it, my mind racing to make sense of its presence, when I noticed something else, a man standing a few feet from the car near the end of the driveway. He was closer to the sidewalk, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the house. On me. My breath caught in my throat, a cold sweat prickling my skin. I didn't want to confront him. This wasn't even my house. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. After what felt like an eternity, he turned, his movements deliberate, and returned to the sedan, sliding into the driver's seat. The car pulled away, but it moved slowly, almost reluctantly, as if the driver was still watching the house. I tracked the headlights as they glided down the road, weaving through the trees that lined the street, their beams cutting in and out of the shadows. Then, abruptly, they stopped, the light hovering in the distance before shutting off completely, plunging the road into darkness. Imagine the silence that follows, the way it presses against you, heavy with unspoken threats. Maybe it was someone visiting a neighbor, I told myself, someone who'd gotten the address wrong. But the explanation felt flimsy, a threadbare shield against the growing dread in my chest. I stayed by the window for 5 long minutes, my eyes straining to catch any sign of movement, but the man didn't return. I forced myself to step back, returning to my chair, but the unease clung to me like a second skin. I considered texting the parents, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I didn't want to alarm them over what might be nothing. It wouldn't change anything, I reasoned, trying to shake the lingering sense of wrongness. To distract myself, I turned on the TV, keeping the volume low so as not to wake the boy. I opened the blinds again, unable to stop myself from glancing outside, as if the darkness might reveal its secrets if I looked long enough. An hour and a half passed, maybe 2, the time slipping by in a haze of sitcom reruns and restless thoughts. Nothing else happened, and I began to relax, my body sinking deeper into the chair, my eyelids growing heavy. I was half asleep, caught in that liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, my mind drifting in a fog of fragmented thoughts. But then, a sound pulled me back, a faint thump, like a whisper from the shadows. It wasn't enough to jolt me fully awake, not until it came again, sharper this time, cutting through the haze. My eyes snapped open, my body tensing as I stood, uncertainty swirling in my chest. I wasn't sure what I'd heard, but I needed to check on the boy. I moved toward the stairs, my footsteps soft on the carpet, when another sound stopped me cold in the hallway. There, in the corner of my vision, was a nightmare made real. I turned my head and my blood froze. A man stood outside the back door, his hand on the handle, his eyes locked on mine through the glass. The dim light from inside cast his face, shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his stare, a predator sizing up its prey. Feel the panic now, the way it claws at your throat, stealing your breath. When he saw me looking, he yanked at the handle harder, his movements frantic, as if determined to force his way inside. Adrenaline surged through me, a primal instinct kicking in as I sprinted up the stairs, my heart pounding like a drum. I burst into the boy's room, scooping him into my arms, his small body warm and heavy against mine. I whispered reassurances, my voice trembling, trying to keep him calm, even as terror gripped me. The sounds from downstairs grew louder, more violent, as if the man was using something to break through the door. I clutched the boy tighter, my mind racing for a plan, when a final deafening noise echoed through the house. The splintering of plastic and metal as the back door gave way. I hurried down the stairs, my legs shaking, and glanced into the hallway. The door was open, and he was inside. He wore casual clothes, his dark hair a stark contrast to the pale light. But it was the knife in his hand that seared itself into my memory, its blade catching the faint glow as he charged toward me. I didn't think. I acted. I bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock as I clutched the boy, my pulse a frantic roar in my ears. The man was close, his footsteps heavy behind me, but I managed to fling the door open and stumble outside. I reached my car, yanking the door open and sliding the boy into the passenger seat before jumping in myself. The man was at my window now, his face a mask of rage, but I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed out of the driveway. I drove to a safe place, my hands trembling on the wheel, and called 911, then the parents, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. By the time help arrived, the man was gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd meant to harm me, or worse, take the boy. How had he known the parents would be away? Why this child? This house? The questions gnawed at me, but what haunted me more was the aftermath. The parents thanked me that night, their voices tight with something I couldn't name, but after that they cut all contact. They never hired me again, their silence a wall I couldn't breach, as if they didn't want me to uncover whatever truth lay beneath that night. Imagine the weight of that silence, the way it whispers secrets you'll never know. I did my own research, digging into their past, and found a single thread. The mother had been married before to a man who bore a striking resemblance to the intruder. But there was no proof, no answers, only speculation that lingered like a shadow. Years have passed, and I doubt I'll ever know the truth, but the memory of that night, of running through the dark with a child in my arms, still wakes me in a cold sweat. The forest was a living thing that night, its breath rustling through the pines, its eyes hidden in the dark. I stood atop an abandoned fire lookout, a speck of life in a sea of wilderness, my heart pounding against the silence. You can almost hear it now. The faint hum of the woods, the weight of unseen watchers, the moment when solitude turns to dread. That was the night I learned how a single light could summon a shadow, how a tower meant to guard could become a trap. The plan was simple, reckless even. In 2015, I set out to hike to an abandoned fire lookout deep in a forest a few hours from my home. It was a forbidden thrill. Climbing the structure was technically illegal, its decaying beams deemed unsafe. Online forums, the most recent from 3 years prior, claimed it was still standing, sturdy enough for a night's camp. I craved the challenge, the solitude, the chance to touch something forgotten. Armed with a handheld GPS, a backpack stuffed with 2 days' gear and a stubborn streak, I parked my car in a roadside ditch and began the trek. The forest was dense, its paths non-existent, forcing me to carve my own way through tangled underbrush and rocky slopes. Each step sank into the earth, the trees closing ranks behind me, their branches whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. The air grew heavier the deeper I went, thick with the scent of pine and damp soil, as if the forest resented my intrusion. After nearly 5 hours, my legs burning and my breath ragged, I glimpsed it. The fire lookout, its skeletal frame rising above the treetops. It was smaller than I'd imagined, a weathered box perched on metal stilts, its paint peeled to reveal gray wood beneath. I circled its base, testing the support beams with cautious pushes. They held firm, unyielding despite their age. The ladder, a narrow column of rusted metal, beckoned me upward. Each step groaned under my weight, the sound swallowed by the forest's vast silence. But the structure felt solid. At the top, I paused, awestruck. The view stretched endless, miles of rolling green, untouched by roads or lights, a world that belonged to the wild. The lookout itself was a relic, a single room barely 150 square feet, with a rotting bed, a splintered desk, and windows so worn they rattled in their frames. I dropped my pack, unrolled my sleeping bag, and heated a meal on my camping stove, the small act of domesticity grounding me in this forsaken place. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stepped onto the lookout's narrow ledge to watch it set. The sky blazed with crimson and gold, the forest below sinking into shadow. It was one of the most beautiful sights I'd ever seen, yet it felt fleeting, like a curtain falling before a darker act. Night came swiftly, clouds blotting out the stars, leaving only an inky void. With nothing else to do, I lingered on the ledge, the wind carrying a chill that seeped into my bones. Then, a flicker caught my eye, a faint orange glow moving through the trees below. Not a flashlight, but something primal, like a torch. It wove between the trunks, its light unsteady, too deliberate to be natural. My pulse quickened. Who would be out here, in this remote wilderness at night? The chances were slim, almost impossible, yet there it was, circling closer, then vanishing behind a rise. I strained to see it again, but the forest swallowed it whole, leaving me with a gnawing unease. I stayed on the ledge, the quiet now oppressive, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. The torch's glow had unsettled me, its strangeness amplifying the lookout's isolation. I tried to rationalize it, another hiker perhaps, lost or camping nearby. But the thought felt hollow. Then, as I scanned the darkness, a figure emerged below, standing in the grassy clearing at the lookout's base. He was motionless, his head tilted upward, staring directly at me. The moonlight barely outlined him, but his gaze was palpable, a weight that pinned me in place. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin, swallowed by the night. He didn't answer, didn't move, just stood there, a shadow carved from the dark. After an agonizing pause, he raised a hand, a vague gesture, apology or acknowledgement, before turning and melting into the trees. My heart pounded. The encounter so surreal it felt like a dream, yet the fear was razor sharp, grounding me in its reality. I retreated inside, locking the flimsy door, though it offered little comfort. The wind battered the windows, the lookout's beams groaning as if protesting the night. I crawled into my sleeping bag, trying to sleep, but the image of that figure lingered, his silent stare a splinter in my mind. The forest felt alive now, its darkness pressing against the glass, whispering of things unseen. Then, in the dead of night, a sound jolted me awake, the faint, metallic groan of the ladder outside. I sat up, my breath catching, straining to hear. It came again, rhythmic, deliberate, the sound of someone climbing. My mind raced. Had the figure returned? Was this real, or a trick of the wind? The groans grew louder, faster, each one a step closer to me. I unzipped my sleeping bag, heart hammering, and grabbed my backpack, instinct overriding fear. I stepped onto the ledge, the cold air biting my skin, and peered around the corner to the ladder's opening. The darkness was absolute, but the groans stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that felt like a trap. Then, footsteps, rapid, heavy, circling the lookout's wooden walkway. I caught a glimpse of a dark figure darting past the windows, a blur of motion in the unlit room. Panic surged, my body moving before my mind could catch up. I lowered myself onto the ladder, its rusted rungs slick under my hands, my pulse roaring as I descended. Halfway down, a head peered over the ledge above, eyes glinting in the faint starlight. I didn't stop, didn't think, just climbed faster, my boots hitting the ground with a jolt. I sprinted into the forest, the trees closing around me like a shield. My flashlight and GPS, still in my pack, guided me through the darkness, hours of stumbling over roots and rocks until I reached my car. I drove away, the lookout's silhouette fading in my rear view, a ghost I'd never face again. Whoever he was, whatever he wanted, I'll never know. But the echo of that ladder's groan still haunts me, a reminder that some shadows don't stay in the dark. Last summer, I sought solace by a hidden lake. Its still waters nestled deep in a forest where the world seemed to forget its own name. This wasn't meant to be anything grand, just a weekend of quiet, a chance to breathe among the trees and water. I'd been coming here since I was a kid, trailing my dad along the unmarked footpath that only locals knew. Those childhood trips painted this place as a sanctuary, untouched by others. That first day unfolded as expected. I pitched my tent under the pines, the lake's surface mirroring the sky, and let the hours slip away in peaceful solitude. The forest hummed with life, yet felt empty, as if I were the only soul for miles. As night fell, I sat by the tent, the stars above whispering memories of simpler times. But even then, a faint unease stirred, like the lake was watching, waiting for me to notice its secrets. The second day dawned bright, the lake gleaming under a cloudless sky. I walked its shores, circling the water 3, maybe 4 times. Lost, thought, unaware that something else was circling me. This place was mine alone, or so I believed. My dad always said no one else came here, not in all the years we'd visited. The forest's silence was a comfort, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the lap of water against the bank. But on one lap, near the tree line where shadows clung like fog, I froze. There, in the soft dirt, were footprints, bare, human, impossibly fresh. They hadn't been there before, I'd have seen them. Their clarity, sharp as a blade, sent a chill down my spine. Why barefoot? Why here, where the lake's edge was rocky, unfit for swimming? The prince led from the trees to the water's edge, then back into the forest, a deliberate path that felt like a message. I scanned the lake, the trees, but saw no one. Were they watching me, hiding just beyond my sight? My dad's old story crept into my mind. A hunter who'd vanished in these woods, leaving only tracks. I shook it off, but the paranoia took root. This wasn't right. Someone was here and they didn't want me to see them. I followed the prince a few steps, heart pounding, but the forest's darkness swallowed them, daring me to venture deeper. I turned back to my campsite. The lake's calm now a lie, its surface hiding something I couldn't name. Every rustle, every snap of a twig felt like eyes in the trees, tracking my every move. The forest was no longer mine, and I was no longer alone. As the sun dipped below the trees, the lake turned to ink, and my unease grew claws. I sat by the campfire, its flames a frail shield against the darkening woods. The footprints haunted me, their bare outlines burned into my mind. I kept glancing at the tree line, expecting a figure to emerge, but the forest gave nothing away. Was I overreacting, or was something truly wrong? I piled more wood onto the fire, its glow pushing back the shadows, but the warmth couldn't touch the cold knot in my chest. You're safe here, I told myself, but the lie felt thin. My dad's story echoed louder. A hunter, lost forever. His tracks the only proof he'd existed. The night deepened, the air thick with silence, broken only by the fire's crackle. The lake watched, its stillness a mask for whatever hid in the trees. I tried to focus on the flames to drown out the paranoia, but every sound, a twig snapping, a leaf rustling, felt like a step closer. The forest was alive, and it wasn't friendly. I sat rigid, heart racing, waiting for the night to reveal what it was hiding. Then, from the darkness, footsteps broke the silence, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I spun toward the sound, my pulse thundering, eyes straining into the night. There were two sets moving in sync, as if the forest itself was stalking me. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. I gripped the ground, frozen as two figures emerged. A man and a woman stopping just beyond the fire's reach. Their shapes were vague, faces hidden, as if they weren't fully part of this world. I couldn't tell their age, their intent, only that they stood. Too still, too silent. Can I help you? I called, my voice trembling. The woman turned and vanished into the woods, her retreat swift, like a specter fleeing the light. The man remained, unmoving, his gaze fixed on me. Then I saw it. His feet, bare, caked in dirt, the same as the prints by the lake. My stomach twisted, dread flooding my veins. I asked again, louder, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned, slow and deliberate, and melted into the trees, leaving only silence. The encounter felt unreal, like a dream, teetering on nightmare. Were they human or something else, drawn to my fire, my presence? My dad's story roared in my mind. The hunter, the tracks, the forest that kept its secrets. I wasn't safe here, not anymore. The fire's warmth felt like a trap, its light a beacon for whatever lurked beyond. I couldn't stay, not 1 second longer. My hands shook as I tore down the camp, stuffing gear into my bag with frantic urgency. The forest was watching, its silence a predator's patience. I kicked the unlit logs from the fire, letting it die, and plunged into the woods. The 2-hour trek to my truck a gauntlet of fear. Every step felt like a dare, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at my mind. For the first 10 minutes I was a live wire, jumping at every sound, certain I was being followed. But as the distance grew, the panic eased, the lake fading. Behind me. Then, 40 minutes in, the silence shattered. running footsteps, fast and human, maybe 100 feet away. I froze, heart hammering, but the darkness hid them. They were out there, stalking me, their bare feet soft against the earth. Minutes later, it came again from the other side, closer now. It was them, the man, the woman, chasing me through the night. Short bursts of steps echoed like they were toying with me, sprinting then stopping, always just out of sight. I ran, breath ragged, the forest a maze of shadows that offered no mercy. My dad's story was no longer a tale. It was, here, alive in the footsteps that hunted me. Somehow I reached my truck, the engine's roar my only salvation. I sped away, the lake a memory I'd never return to. I never learned who they were, what they wanted, or if they were even real. Sometimes I wonder if they were ghosts, bound to that lake, or something worse. The footprints, the fire, the chase. They haunt me, a riddle unsolved. I see them in my dreams, bare feet in the dirt, waiting for me to come back. Last summer, I sought solace by a hidden lake. Its still waters nestled deep in a forest where the world seemed to forget its own name. This wasn't meant to be anything grand, just a weekend of quiet, a chance to breathe among the trees and water. I'd been coming here since I was a kid, trailing my dad along the unmarked footpath that only locals knew. Those childhood trips painted this place as a sanctuary, untouched by others. That first day unfolded as expected. I pitched my tent under the pines, the lake's surface mirroring the sky, and let the hours slip away in peaceful solitude. The forest hummed with life, yet felt empty, as if I were the only soul for miles. As night fell, I sat by the tent, the stars above whispering memories of simpler times. But even then, a faint unease stirred, like the lake was watching, waiting for me to notice its secrets. The second day dawned bright, the lake gleaming under a cloudless sky. I walked its shores, circling the water 3, maybe 4 times. Lost, thought, unaware that something else was circling me. This place was mine alone, or so I believed. My dad always said no one else came here, not in all the years we'd visited. The forest's silence was a comfort, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the lap of water against the bank. But on one lap, near the tree line where shadows clung like fog, I froze. There, in the soft dirt, were footprints, bare, human, impossibly fresh. They hadn't been there before, I'd have seen them. Their clarity, sharp as a blade, sent a chill down my spine. Why barefoot? Why here, where the lake's edge was rocky, unfit for swimming? The prints led from the trees to the water's edge, then back into the forest, a deliberate path that felt like a message. I scanned the lake, the trees, but saw no one. Were they watching me, hiding just beyond my sight? My dad's old story crept into my mind, a hunter who'd vanished in these woods, leaving only tracks. I shook it off, but the paranoia took root. This wasn't right. Someone was here and they didn't want me to see them. I followed the prints a few steps, heart pounding, but the forest's darkness swallowed them, daring me to venture deeper. I turned back to my campsite, the lake's calm now a lie, its surface hiding something I couldn't name. Every rustle, every snap of a twig felt like eyes in the trees, tracking my every move. The forest was no longer mine, and I was no longer alone. As the sun dipped below the trees, the lake turned to ink, and my unease grew claws. I sat by the campfire, its flames a frail shield against the darkening woods. The footprints haunted me, their bare outlines burned into my mind. I kept glancing at the tree line, expecting a figure to emerge, but the forest gave nothing away. Was I overreacting? Or was something truly wrong? I piled more wood onto the fire, its glow pushing back the shadows, but the warmth couldn't touched the cold knot in my chest. You're safe here, I told myself, but the lie felt thin. My dad's story echoed louder. A hunter, lost forever. His tracks the only proof he'd existed. The night deepened, the air thick with silence, broken only by the fire's crackle. The lake watched, its stillness a mask for whatever hid in the trees. I tried to focus on the flames to drown out the paranoia, but every sound, a twig snapping, a leaf rustling, felt like a step closer. The forest was alive, and it wasn't friendly. I sat rigid, heart racing, waiting for the night to reveal what it was hiding. Then, from the darkness, footsteps broke the silence, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I spun toward the sound, my pulse thundering, eyes straining into the night. There were two sets moving in sync, as if the forest itself was stalking me. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. I gripped the ground, frozen as two figures emerged, a man and a woman stopping just beyond the fire's reach. Their shapes were vague, faces hidden, as if they weren't fully part of this world. I couldn't tell their age, their intent, only that they stood. Too still, too silent. Can I help you? I called, my voice trembling. The woman turned and vanished into the woods, her retreat swift, like a specter fleeing the light. The man remained, unmoving, his gaze fixed on me. Then I saw it. His feet, bare, caked in dirt, the same as the prints by the lake. My stomach twisted, dread flooding my veins. I asked again, louder, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned, slow and deliberate, and melted into the trees, leaving only silence. The encounter felt unreal, like a dream, teetering on nightmare. Were they human or something else, drawn to my fire, my presence? My dad's story roared in my mind. The hunter, the tracks, the forest that kept its secrets. I wasn't safe here, not anymore. The fire's warmth felt like a trap, its light a beacon for whatever lurked beyond. I couldn't stay. Not 1 second longer. My hands shook as I tore down the camp, stuffing gear into my bag with frantic urgency. The forest was watching, its silence a predator's patience. I kicked the unlit logs from the fire, letting it die, and plunged into the woods. The 2-hour trek to my truck a gauntlet of fear. Every step felt like a dare, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at my mind. For the first 10 minutes I was a live wire, jumping at every sound, certain I was being followed. But as the distance grew, the panic eased, the lake fading. Behind me. Then, 40 minutes in, the silence shattered. Running footsteps, fast and human, maybe 100 feet away. I froze, heart hammering, but the darkness hid them. They were out there, stalking me, their bare feet soft against the earth. Minutes later, it came again from the other side, closer now. It was them, the man, the woman, chasing me through. The night. Short bursts of steps echoed like they were toying with me, sprinting then stopping, always just out of sight. I ran, breath ragged, the forest a maze of shadows that offered no mercy. My dad's story was no longer a tale. It was, here, alive in the footsteps that hunted me. Somehow I reached my truck, the engine's roar my only salvation. I sped away, the lake a memory I'd never return to. I never learned who they were, what they wanted, or if they were even real. Sometimes I wonder if they were ghosts, bound to that lake, or something worse. The footprints, the fire, the chase. They haunt me, a riddle unsolved. I see them in my dreams, bare feet in the dirt, waiting for me to come back. That's the terror I lived through a couple of years ago, a memory that still claws at the edges of my sleep. I was 24 then, a young woman from northern Arizona, chasing freedom along the west coast in a small camper van I'd turned into my home. The van life wasn't just a trend for me. It was a way to escape, to find peace in the solitude of the wild. People lived all sorts of lives in vans and RVs, but I craved the quiet of the backcountry, where the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Cities felt suffocating, their crowded parking lots a gamble I wasn't willing to take, so I stuck to small towns and remote trails, seeking the kind of serenity only the wilderness could offer. I always believed the forest was safer than the chaos of urban stealth camping. Sure, the darkness could be unnerving, the way the trees seemed to lean in close at night, their branches casting skeletal shadows under a pale moon. But I'd rather face that than the unpredictability of a city lot, where every passing stranger could be a threat. You know that feeling, don't you? The way solitude can feel like a shield, until it suddenly isn't. That week, I was weaving my way through Washington, traveling slowly between two big cities, savoring the journey. I kept to back roads where pavement gave way to gravel and the world felt untouched. I'd hunker down at campsites for days at a time, letting the rhythm of nature dictate my pace. On that particular day, I turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt trail, the kind that wound deep into the forest, flanked by towering pines that blocked out the sky. There were a few pull-off spots along the way, but they were empty, the cool ground undisturbed, as if no one had been there in months. I kept driving, hoping to find a larger, more secluded spot to call my own for the night. At the trail's end, I found what I was looking for. A wide clearing circled by trees, a natural amphitheater of green and shadow. It wasn't scenic in the traditional sense, with no sweeping views or sparkling lakes, but it was peaceful. The kind of place where the world seemed to hold its breath. A stone ring sat in the center, perfect for a campfire, though I wouldn't be lighting one tonight. It was spring in Washington, and the rain had been relentless, a constant drizzle that turned the ground to mud. I leveled my van, the tires sinking slightly into the soft earth, and parked, the familiar hum of the engine fading into silence. With the rain keeping me inside, I opened the side door for a breath of fresh air, the damp scent of pine and earth, flooding in as I fired up my propane stove to cook a simple meal. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray and violet, and I knew I had a few hours before I'd turn in for the night. Over the next half hour, the light faded completely, the rain intensifying into a steady downpour. I closed the door to keep the water out, cracking open a small window near the back of the van instead, letting the cool air seep in as I settled onto my bed. I pulled out my laptop, the glow of the screen a small comfort in the darkening van, and started a show to pass the time. The rain pattered against the metal roof, a soothing rhythm that lulled me into a false sense of calm. But midway through an episode, a sudden glare shattered the peace. A harsh light reflected off my laptop screen, coming from the open window. Behind me. My heart skipped a beat, my body tensing as I turned to look, but the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, not fading or moving, but shutting off abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. I peered out the window, my eyes straining against the darkness, but there was nothing to see. Just an endless void of trees and rain. Imagine the silence that follows, the way it presses against you, heavy with unspoken threats. I told myself it was another camper, their headlights catching the window as they parked nearby, then turned off their vehicle. But the explanation felt hollow. The light hadn't come from the trail I'd driven down. Behind my window was nothing but dense forest. Could there be another path I hadn't noticed? There was no way to investigate, not in this weather, so I turned back to my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I resumed the show. Every few minutes I glanced at the windows, my ears straining for any sound beyond the rain's steady drum. I thought I heard something, A rustle, a snap, but the storm made it impossible to be sure. Each time I looked, the darkness offered no answers, and I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. By 10 or 11, I decided to call it a night, the weight of the day pulling at my limbs. I turned off the laptop, closed the windows, and drew the shades, plunging the van into near total darkness. I slipped under the covers, the familiar comfort of my bed a small anchor in the unease that still lingered. Sleep usually came easily to me, but tonight it eluded me, my mind replaying that fleeting light, the shadows it cast on my thoughts. An hour passed, then another, the rain growing heavier, thunder rolling in the distance like a warning. The storm was loud, a cacophony that drowned out any hope of rest, and I lay there staring into the dark, my senses on edge. Around 2 hours into the night, a new sound cut through the storm. It was faint but unmistakable, a rustle of movement. Just outside the van, like someone or something brushing against the undergrowth, snapping a branch underfoot. My breath caught in my throat, my body going rigid as I listened, the sound sharp enough to know it was real. I sat up, my heart pounding, and peered through a gap in the window cover. The darkness was absolute, the rain a curtain of shadow that hid the ground from view. The longer I stared, the more I felt it, a prickling sensation like unseen eyes staring back at me, their gaze heavy with intent. I lowered the cover, my hands trembling, and tried to calm myself, whispering that I was overreacting. But then a voice broke the silence. It was a man's voice, low and urgent, a loud whisper that seemed to carry through the storm, as if he was speaking to someone else nearby. I froze, too terrified to move, knowing that if I looked out, they'd see me. They must have already guessed someone was inside the van, which made the situation all the more chilling. For 2 or 3 agonizing minutes, I heard nothing but the rain and thunder, my mind racing with fear. Then, a new sound sent ice through my veins. Something pressed against the sliding side door, the faint groan of plastic under pressure, followed by a sharp knock. My heart leapt into my throat, my body paralyzed as another knock came seconds later. I was certain they knew I was here, but I couldn't bring myself to speak, to confirm my presence. Maybe they didn't know how many people were inside, or whether I was a man or a woman. Staying silent felt like my only defense. The knocking continued for 5 unbearable minutes, each one a jolt to my nerves. The storm outside a cruel mask for their persistence. They must have been soaked, unable to see through the rain, yet they didn't stop. Then a voice called out, "Sheriff's Department, open up." Feel the dread now, the way it coils around your heart, squeezing tight. I didn't believe it for a second. If they were really law enforcement, why hadn't they said so from the start? They kept knocking, repeating variations of the same lie, their tone growing more insistent, a desperate ploy to lure me out without force. I inched the window cover up, my movements slow and deliberate, and peeked outside. All I could see was a dark figure near the door, his shape indistinct in the storm. But he didn't look like an officer. No uniform, no badge, just a shadow with intent. Panic surged through me, my mind screaming that this was about to turn deadly. I debated for 30 seconds, the knocking growing more impatient before deciding I couldn't stay. I scrambled to the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I turned the key, the engine roaring to life. 2 sets of footsteps raced toward the van, their urgency a death knell in the night. I pulled out just as a figure appeared at my window, his empty silhouette a blur of menace. The van lurched forward, tires spinning on the wet ground, but by some miracle it didn't get stuck. I sped down the trail, my heart in my throat, and glanced back. No other vehicle followed, which only deepened the horror of their intentions. I filed a report with the county, my voice trembling as I recounted the night. They confirmed no officers had been in the area, but there was no follow-up, no answers. I escaped something terrible that night, a darkness I can't name, and though nothing else has happened since, the memory lingers, a whisper in the rain that still haunts me. The night was a shroud, wrapping my small town in silence. I was driving home, the streets empty, the world asleep. My headlights swept over familiar houses, but something felt off, like the air itself was holding a secret. It was past midnight, and I was alone, or so I thought. The dashboard clock ticked toward danger, and in my rearview mirror a pair of lights was waiting to ignite a nightmare. The town I called home was a quiet place, nestled on the East Coast, where the biggest crime was kids sneaking a joint in the park. But the police were everywhere, unmarked cars lurking on every corner, from sleek sedans to rugged SUVs, all hunting for the smallest misstep. I'd grown used to their presence, their silent threat, but tonight, I was on edge. I'd been on a date in a neighboring area, the roads unfamiliar, and it was well past 11 p.m., too late for someone my age to be driving according to local rules. A small stash of weed, tucked under my spare tire, weighed on my mind. If I got caught, it'd be trouble. I kept to the speed limit, my hand steady on the wheel of my old Nissan. The radio hummed softly, a distraction from the knot in my stomach. Then headlights flared in my mirror, too close, too bright. An unmarked car, its silhouette unmistakable. A cop. My heart sank. 5 miles, I told myself, just stay calm. But the car didn't pass, didn't waver. It tailgated me, relentless. Through empty streets, its presence a pressure against my spine. Finally, blue and red lights spun to life, slicing the night. I swallowed hard, pulling into an abandoned gas station, its pumps dark and lifeless. I fumbled for my license, registration, and insurance, my palms slick with sweat. The officer approached, his boots heavy on the pavement. He was young, barely, older than me, with long blonde hair and a face too sharp, too perfect. His uniform was crisp, but something was wrong. His pants were too short, exposing inches of pale ankle, like a costume thrown together in haste. He leaned into my window, too close, his breath warm against my cheek. "Where you headed?" he asked, his voice smooth but probing. "Know why I pulled you over?" "No," I said, my voice small. He smirked, a glint in his eyes. "I do." He took my papers and walked back to his car, his stride too casual. I watched in the mirror, my unease growing. His car had no police badge, just a civilian plate, stark under the streetlight. This isn't right. My gut churned, a warning I couldn't ignore. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. When he returned, his smirk was gone, replaced by something colder. "Pull around back," he said, pointing to the shadowed rear of the station. "Now." My blood turned to ice. Why behind the building? No one would see us there, no one would hear. I nodded, my hands trembling, but inside, alarm bells screamed. As he walked back to his car, I rolled down my window and dialed 911, my voice a whisper. "I've been pulled over by a suspicious cop," I told the operator, reading off his plate number. Her response was immediate, sharp. "That's not a police car. Get out of there. Find a public place." I started the engine, my heart pounding, and pulled forward, circling the building as if complying. But instead of stopping, I floored it, tearing back onto the road. His lights flashed again, red and blue, chasing me through the night. I was crying now, my old Nissan shaking as I pushed it to 75 bpm, faster than I'd ever dared. The road was a blur, my hands white on the wheel. He stayed close, his car a predator, lights glaring but no siren, just silence, like a hunter stalking. prey. I swerved through a red light, the town's main road coming into view. Cars honked as I weaved through traffic, my finger hovering over the horn. Find a real cop, I thought, my only hope. This road was a hot spot for speed traps, and I prayed. One was hiding nearby. I spotted a diner, long closed, its lot a known hiding spot for patrols. I whipped into the parking lot, my car screeching, and stopped, scanning desperately for help. The lot was empty, the diner dark. No one's here. Despair clawed at me, my engine rattling as if ready to give out. I sat there, frozen, my knuckles aching. Then a car door slammed behind me. I braced myself, expecting his face, his too short pants, his cold smirk. But it wasn't him. 3 marked police cars screeched into the lot. Officers spilling out, hands on their holsters, faces grim. I collapsed against the wheel, tears streaming. They took my statement, their voices steady but urgent. The fake cop had vanished when I hit the diner's lot, likely spooked by the risk of real police. They told me I'd been lucky, too lucky. A string of violent assaults, one fatal, had plagued the next state, all linked to a man in a fake cop car matching my description. He's still out there. The words echo in my mind, a shadow that trails me. I drive slower now, my eyes always on the mirror, waiting for those lights to reappear. The town feels different, its safety a lie. Every unmarked car is a threat, every shadow a reminder of the night I almost didn't make it home. My mother's voice trembled when she told me this story, her eyes distant, as if she were still trapped in that summer night in the 1980s. I was just a kid, sitting wide-eyed at our kitchen table, but the weight of her words sank into me, a warning carved in fear. You can almost feel the cold grip of that night now, the stifling air of a small town, the false safety of familiar faces, the moment when trust turns to terror. This is the story of Miss Kelvin, my mother, and the night she learned that evil can hide behind a badge and a smile. I grew up hearing tales of my mother's rebellious teenage years, stories she'd share with a wry smile to keep my siblings and me from straying too far. In the 1980s, she was Miss Kelvin, a 16-year-old in a sleepy American town of 5,000 souls, where cornfields stretched endless and high school football was sacred. The town was a postcard of small-town charm, white picket fences, church bells, on Sundays, neighbors who knew your name. But beneath its surface, secrets festered, and my mother, with her penchant for sneaking out and sipping stolen liquor, was about to uncover one. That night, she and 3 friends slipped out past midnight, their laughter fueled by cheap beer and the thrill of defiance. They piled into a beat-up car, music blaring, weaving through the dark roads, oblivious to the eyes watching from the shadows. The joyride ended abruptly when red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror. My mother's heart sank as the car slowed, pulling onto the gravel shoulder. The girls exchanged panicked glances, one already tearing up, the stench of alcohol clinging to their breath. My mother, always the calm one, turned to see 2 officers approaching. One stayed in, the cruiser, his face obscured, but the other strode forward, his silhouette broad under the cruiser's glare. As he leaned toward the open window, my mother's fear softened. She recognized him. Mr. Nelson, a pillar of their church, a man in his 40s with a deep voice and a reputation for kindness. "Having a good night, are we, Miss Kelvin?" he asked, his tone light but edged with something sharp. She forced a smile, hoping his familiarity might spare them. "Sorry, Mr. Nelson. We must have been distracting the driver." Her lie was practiced, but his eyes, glinting in the dark, saw through it. Mr. Nelson took their licenses and registration, his movements slow, deliberate. "Step out of the vehicle," he said, his voice flat. The girls obeyed, their sneakers crunching on gravel, the night air heavy with the scent of corn and diesel. He and his partner, a stranger with a lean frame, directed them to stand by the car, far enough to feel exposed. My mother glanced back, catching a faint smirk on Mr. Nelson's face, a crack in his righteous facade. Then the air shifted, as if the night itself recoiled. "Okay, ladies," he said, his voice low, conspiratorial. "There's two ways this can go." He turned to his partner, their shared grin a silent agreement. "We can take you home. Tell your parents everything, or..." His smile widened, a predator's gleam. "You can do something for us." My mother's stomach twisted, the words a cold blade against her skin. One friend's voice trembled. "What kind of things?" Mr. Nelson's reply was a venomous purr. "I'm thinking a strip search." The world seemed to still, the only sound the rustle of corn stalks in the breeze. My mother's mind reeled, unable to reconcile the Mr. Nelson she knew. Churchgoer, father, community man, with the monster before her. His partner's low chuckle broke the silence, a sound that crawled under her skin. "What?" she managed, her voice barely audible. Mr. Nelson's smirk grew hungrier. "Come on, this doesn't have to end badly. Just show us some skin, and we forget this ever happened." The girls stood frozen, their defiance crumbling under his gaze. My mother's heart pounded, her mind screaming to run, but the cruiser's lights pinned them like prey. When they refused, Mr. Nelson's face darkened, his voice a growl that shook the night. "I don't think you understand. Be nice. Do it or you'll regret it." The threat was a physical weight pressing them into submission. With trembling hands they complied, stripping under the officer's leering eyes, their laughter a cruel chorus. Humiliation burned through my mother, but her mind raced, searching for escape. The officers, smug and distracted, had them lean against the car, their backs to the cornfield. My mother caught her friend's eye, the one sobbing softly, and mouthed a plan. They counted silently, 1, 2, 3, and bolted, sprinting into the cornfield's embrace. The stalks swallowed them, their sharp leaves cutting at their skin as they ran, hearts pounding. The officers' shouts fading behind. Mr. Nelson lunged for one girl but missed, and to their shock, the men didn't pursue. The girls crouched, in the dark, the cornfields rustle their only shield, waiting 10 agonizing minutes to ensure the cruiser was gone. They stumbled back to the car, dressed in their shame, and drove home, the night's weight pressing on their chests. In the days that followed, silence became their prison. They didn't report it. Mr. Nelson standing in the town was untouchable, his word gold against theirs. To speak out would brand them liars, ruin their lives in a place where gossip was law. My mother saw him at church, his smirk a silent taunt, his wink a reminder of their powerlessness. The trauma lingered, a shadow she carried into adulthood, a lesson she passed to me. Even the most upstanding can hide a monster within. I carry it too, an inherited fear of those who wield power with a smile, a truth that haunts me as much as it did her, a warning that the shadows of that night are never far away. Two summers ago, my son's birthday promised a day of laughter, but the night had other plans. We'd spent the morning at a water park, his 16-year-old grin lighting up the slides, but by evening, we were lost in a small Midwest town, Google Maps betraying us with twisting routes. Hungry and tired, we stopped at a diner, its neon sign a beacon in the fading light. As we ate, the clatter of plates and chatter of locals felt like a safe haven, a moment of normalcy after a long day. Across the street, a county fair glowed, its lights beckoning like a siren's call. With time to kill, we wandered over, the air thick with the scent of popcorn and engine grease. The fair was winding down, but a tractor pull was about to start, a novelty we'd never seen. We climbed the bleachers, the crowd a mix of families and stumbling drunks, their laughter sharp against the dusk. My son sat close, my strong friend, beside us, and I felt secure, unaware that the night was watching, waiting to unravel. A story my cousin once told lingered, a fairgoer who vanished, last seen on a dark road. I pushed it aside, but the fair's glow felt hollow, hiding something sinister beneath its cheer. The tractor pull roared, but the darkening sky urged us to leave. The drunks in the crowd felt like shadows, their eyes glinting with something I couldn't place. With my son's safety in mind, we left early, weaving through the thinning fairgoers to the closed diner where our car waited. The town was silent, its streets empty as we pulled out, following Google Maps onto a back road I recognized as the way home. But then I saw it, a car's headlights in my rearview mirror, the only other vehicle in this desolate stretch of woods. Friend noticed too, his jaw tightening. Why would anyone else take this lonely road, flanked by trees that swallowed the moonlight? I told myself they were travelers like us, heading to the interstate, but the unease grew, a cold weight in my chest. The road dipped and curved, hills hiding what lay ahead, and I drove cautiously, wary of deer leaping from the shadows. The car stayed close, too close, its presence a silent threat. I slowed, hoping they'd pass, but they didn't. My son shifted in the back seat, sensing the tension. My cousin's story echoed. A driver followed, never seen again. I shook it off, focusing on the interstate ahead, but the headlights in my mirror felt like eyes, unblinking, relentless. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following us, and the night was no longer ours. On that hilly back road, the darkness pressed in, the woods a wall of secrets on either side. The car behind us clung like a shadow, matching my every move, its tinted windows hiding the driver's intent. I slowed to a crawl, hoping annoyance would force them past, but they surged closer, their bumper kissing mine, aggressive and unyielding. My heart raced, fear spiking for my son, his birthday now a cruel backdrop to this nightmare. I sped up, the engine straining, desperate for the interstate's promise of safety. But they kept pace, relentless, a hunter toying with prey. We hit the interstate, and I prayed it was over, a local prank gone too far. But the car followed, its headlights, a constant in my mirror. I slowed again, then floored it, weaving through the sparse traffic, but they matched every maneuver, their presence a vice around my chest. This wasn't random. They wanted us, and I didn't know why. My friend's anger boiled, his fists clenched, but I refused to stop, not with my son in the back, his wide eyes reflecting my fear. My cousin's story haunted me. A car chased, found empty, the driver gone. I pushed it down, gripping the wheel, praying for a miracle. In desperation, I pressed the horn, its blare shattering the night. The car swerved to the shoulder, headlights vanishing, and for a moment I breathed. Relief flooded me, but suspicion lingered. Why turn off the lights? We sped toward home, the road a lifeline, but the darkness felt alive, watching, waiting to strike again. My son's voice trembled, asking if we were safe, and I lied, saying yes while my heart screamed otherwise. 15 minutes passed, the interstate quiet, our fear easing as we talked, trying to bury the ordeal. We were 25 minutes from home, the road dotted with occasional cars, a fragile sense of safety returning. But then, as the traffic thinned and we were alone again, headlights blazed beside us, bright and sudden, like a predator lunging from the dark. My stomach dropped. The same car, its lights off all this time, stalking us in silence, waiting for this moment. They'd been there, invisible, for an hour, their patience a terrifying promise. Anger replaced fear, my hands shaking on the wheel. This wasn't a game. This was malice, and my son was in their sights. Far ahead, a semi's taillights glowed, a beacon of hope. I floored it, the car roaring, but the stranger paced us in the fast lane, their tinted windows a void. They knew I was aiming for the semi, and they wouldn't let us go. Then they swerved, a deliberate arc toward my rear panel, trying to spin us off the road. My son gasped, my friend cursed, and I jerked the wheel, their bumper missing us by inches. My heart pounded, the world narrowing to the semi's lights. I hugged the truck's tail, leaving no room for the stranger to cut in. They swerved again, reckless, their car a weapon, but I held tight, the semi my shield. My cousins, story screamed in my mind, a driver, a chase, a wreck found empty. This couldn't be our end, not on his birthday. The semi loomed, its bulk a promise of salvation, and I clung to it, praying the stranger would falter. We trailed the semi, my knuckles white, the stranger weaving, trying to break through. Then, a miracle. The truck driver swerved into the IE fast lane, cutting off the stranger, brakes flashing like a signal. I seized the chance, speeding past at 90, the engine screaming as we tore down the slow lane. My hometown was close, and I veered left onto a back street, tires squealing, landing at a bustling gas station, its lights a sanctuary. A cop stood by his cruiser, and my friend leapt out, words tumbling as he explained our terror. The officer called for backup, searching for the car, but it was gone, swallowed by the night. We hid my car in a lot, a friend trailing us home, fear of the stranger finding us lingering like poison. I watched for that white car for months, each sighting a jolt of dread. My cousin's story felt real now, a driver lost, a road cursed. The worst part? That town housed a massive mental health asylum, its shadow looming over the chase. Was our pursuer an escapee, driven by madness? I checked the news, haunted by the thought. That night still lives in my dreams, headlights flaring, a car chasing us into the void. We escaped, but the fear remains, a scar on an ordinary day. I drive those roads now, waiting for those lights to return, knowing they might, anytime, anywhere. That's the nightmare I lived through in 2009, a memory that still sends shivers down my spine. I was 22, fresh out of college, leaving my home state of California to start a new chapter as a corrections officer in the East. The journey was long, cutting through desolate highways that seemed to stretch into eternity. It was 3 a.m. on a Sunday, and I was on the infamous loneliest highway, a name that felt all too fitting in the dead of night. The road was a ribbon of asphalt flanked by endless stretches of desert and scrub, the kind of place where you could drive for hours without seeing another soul. I hadn't passed a single car in over half an hour, the silence broken only by the hum of my engine and the occasional flicker of my headlights catching a reflective sign. I was tired, my eyes heavy, but not quite exhausted enough to pull over and nap. I figured I'd push through, the promise of a new job fueling my determination. The highway was a void, the darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the world beyond my headlights. The air inside the car was stale, the faint glow of my dashboard, the only light in the gloom. I kept the radio off, the silence somehow more comforting than static-filled stations that couldn't reach this far. My mind wandered, replaying the life I was leaving behind, the friends I'd said goodbye to, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But then, a shape emerged from the darkness, pulling me back to reality. A car sat on the side of the highway, its hazard lights blinking weakly, a lone figure standing beside it. I slowed down, my instincts torn between caution and the urge to help. The figure was a woman, petite and fragile-looking, her silhouette stark against the barren landscape. I rolled my window down just a sliver, the cold night air seeping in, and called out to her, my voice tentative. Something about her felt off, a nagging unease I couldn't name, like a whisper in the back of my mind screaming danger. You've felt this before, haven't you? That gut instinct that screams to run even when you don't know why. I asked if she needed me to call a tow truck or AA, my tone careful, my body tense. But her response was immediate, her hand reaching for my door handle with a desperation that sent a chill through me. I pulled back, my heart thudding, and explained I wasn't comfortable letting her in, but I'd wait for a tow truck. Her face twisted into a mask of rage, her eyes flashing with something feral as she berated me. She called me cruel, her voice sharp and accusing, mocking my hesitation. "You're a big man," she sneered. "What am I going to do?" She was small, maybe 5'2", barely 90 pounds, while I towered over her at 6 feet, easily outweighing her by 100 pounds. Her words gnawed at my guilt, and against my better judgment I unlocked the door, convincing myself she was right. Imagine the moment you realize you've made a mistake, the way the air grows heavy with regret. She slid into the passenger seat, her movements quick and jittery, and I asked who I could call for her. I fumbled with my old BlackBerry slide, a relic from a decade ago, its screen casting a faint glow on her tense expression. But she didn't want help, not the kind I offered. She insisted I drive her to the next town. Her voice clipped, her eyes avoiding mine as she fidgeted with her oversized purse. The unease I'd felt earlier surged back, stronger now, a cold knot in my stomach. I mentioned calling for help again, but she snapped, her tone aggressive, demanding I take her where she wanted to go. My mind raced, trying to untangle the situation, to find a way out of the mistake I'd made. And then a shadow moved in my rearview mirror. I hadn't noticed him before, too focused on the woman beside me. But there he was, a man tall and menacing, approaching my driver's side door with purpose. He'd been hiding, either in her car or nearby, his presence a trap I'd walked right into. Panic surged through me, my fight-or-flight instinct kicking in as I slammed the car into drive and floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching against the pavement as I sped off, the man's hand brushing my door just as I pulled away. A sharp sound cut through the night, followed by the shattering of my side mirror. He was shooting at me. The realization hit like a punch, adrenaline flooding my system as I pushed the car to nearly 90 miles an hour, the engine roaring in protest. The woman beside me erupted, her drug-fueled rage spilling over as she pounded her fists against me, screaming for me to stop, to let her out. Her plan, whatever it was, had failed, and her desperation was a wild, unhinged thing. I didn't dare slow down, not until I'd put enough distance between us and the man with the gun. When I finally felt safe enough, I screeched to a stop, my hands trembling on the wheel, and demanded she get out. She lunged for her purse, her movements frantic, but I was done. My body shook with the aftermath of fear as I reached over, flung the door open, and shoved her out onto the highway. I grabbed for her purse, but she clung to it, though not before half its contents spilled onto my passenger seat. Crumpled, napkins, tubes of lipstick, and what I later realized was drug paraphernalia. I sped off again, the door still open, the cold wind whipping through the car as I put miles between us. When I was sure she wasn't following, I pulled over, slamming the door shut and locking it, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I drove on, the highway stretching endlessly before me, my mind a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. It wasn't until the gray light of dawn crept over the horizon that I stopped at a Denny's. The neon sign a beacon of normalcy in a night gone wrong. I parked, my body still trembling, and let the reality of what had happened wash over me. I'd come so close to death, the shattered mirror a stark reminder of the bullet that could have ended me. Tears stung my eyes as I sat in the booth, staring at the pancakes I couldn't bring myself to eat, my appetite replaced by a hollow dread. Feel the weight of that moment, the way survival tastes bitter when you realize how close you came to the end. That's when I noticed the mess on my passenger seat, her things scattered in her haste, a grim souvenir of the night. Most of it was trash, soggy napkins, cheap lipstick, but the drug paraphernalia stopped me cold. Needles, a small baggie, of powder, the kind of evidence that could ruin lives. I thought about calling the cops or finding a highway patrol officer, but fear held me back. I'd always dreamed of becoming a cop myself, a dream I was chasing with this new job. And I knew that getting caught with this stuff, even if it wasn't mine, could destroy that future. They'd never believe my story, not with the chaos of the night as my only witness. So I did something foolish. I gathered her things into a trash bag and threw them away, my hands shaking as I erased the evidence of my mistake. Across the street at a gas station, I spotted a cop car and approached, my voice unsteady as I recounted the night. He listened, his expression a mix of skepticism and reprimand, scolding me for stopping, for letting her in. He promised to look into it, but his tone lacked conviction, and I knew nothing would come of it. I returned to Denny's, picked at my food, and drove on, the weight of the night heavy on my shoulders. I never replaced that mirror, a jagged scar on my car that I couldn't bear to fix. Eventually, I sold the car, unable to stomach the memories. It held. 10 years later, the fear still lingers, a shadow that follows me on every road. I hesitate to stop for stranded motorists now, the lesson of that night etched into my bones, a reminder that even the loneliest highway can be a hunting ground, and I was almost the prey. The rain pounded the house, a relentless drumbeat against the windows. I was 16, babysitting for my neighbor Alice, tucked into the familiar warmth of her home. The storm raged outside, but inside, I felt safe, cocooned with 2 little girls, and their yapping dog. The clock ticked past 6:30 p.m., the parents long gone, the alarm set. I thought I knew this house, this routine, every creak and shadow. But that night, a voice would reach through the phone, tearing apart my sense of safety, and the darkness would come alive. Alice's house was a cozy haven, its walls lined with family photos, the air thick with the scent of lavender and fresh laundry. I'd babysat here countless times, a weekend ritual that felt like second nature. Tonight, Alice had a friend over, Jennifer, a shy girl who clung to her side. By 6:30 p.m., I'd bathed them, tucked them into bed, and settled them with cartoons. Their giggles filled the room, a soft counterpoint to the storm's fury. I slipped into the kitchen to grab snacks, the breakfast nook's glass doors reflecting the rain's endless dance. The world outside was a blur of water and shadow, the night pressing close. I was slicing apples when the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the storm. I wiped my hands, assuming it was Jason or Janelle checking in, as they often did. I picked up, my voice light. "Hello?" A man's voice answered, low and unfamiliar. "Hey, how you doing?" I paused, caught off guard. "I'm good. Are you calling for Jason? He's not here, but I can take a message." "Maybe," he said, his tone teasing, almost playful. "Or maybe I just wanted to talk to you." My smile faltered. "Who is this?" I figured it was a family friend, someone bored messing around. The girls called from the bedroom, their voices insistent, so I brushed it off. "Sorry, I've gotta go. Have a good night." I hung up, the unease fleeting like a passing cloud. I grabbed the snacks and returned to Alice and Jennifer, settling into a recliner as their cartoon blared. The storm growled outside, thunder rumbling through the walls, but the girls seemed unbothered, their eyes glued to the screen. Minutes later, the phone rang again. I sighed, trudging back to the kitchen, the rain's rhythm louder now. I picked up, expecting Jason's voice. Instead, it was him again. "You know it's rude to hang up on people," he said, his tone sharper though not yet angry. The thunder roared, shaking the house, and the girls shouted for me, their voices tinged with fear. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I need to get back to the kids. Good night." I hung up, my heart beating a little faster. What's his deal? I stood there, the receiver still in my hand, the storm's chaos seeping into my thoughts. The phone rang again, insistent, almost mocking. I let it ring, my stomach twisting. Don't answer. But it kept going, each chime a needle in my nerves. Finally, after 10 minutes of silence, it rang again. Maybe it's Jason, I thought, desperate for normalcy. I answered, my voice hesitant. "Hello? You little..." he screamed, his voice a venomous snarl. "Don't you hang up on me." I froze, my breath catching. "Leave me alone," I shouted back, my voice cracking. "I'll call the cops if you call again." I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking. Alice and Jennifer appeared behind. Me, their eyes wide, faces pale. "It's okay," I lied, forcing a smile. "Let's get some ice cream." I turned to the freezer, my mind racing, when the phone rang again. Before I could stop her, Alice grabbed it, her face twisted in terror, a scream tearing from her throat. I snatched the phone, ready to unleash my anger when his voice came, calm and chilling. "That's a nice pink shirt you're wearing." My blood ran cold. I was wearing a pink shirt, soft and faded, a detail no one outside this house could. No. The storm roared, and I remembered. A clap of thunder during his second call, perfectly synced with the one I'd heard in the house. He's here. The realization was a blade slicing through my courage. I hit the kitchen light switch, plunging us into darkness, and grabbed the girls, their small hands trembling in mine. Alex, their dog, whimpered as I pulled him close. We stumbled to the pantry, the door swinging inward, and I shoved us inside, pushing a heavy bag of rice against it. I pressed my back to the shelves, my feet braced against the rice. The girls clutched tight, my hands over their mouths. Alex nestled between my legs, silent as if he sensed the danger. The alarm blared, a piercing wail, and the phone rang again, relentless. The storm swallowed all other sounds, but I felt him. His presence, heavy, invasive, just beyond the door. Minutes stretched, my heart pounding, the girl's sobs muffled against my chest. Then a voice, a woman's, calling through the house. "Police, it's safe to come out." I didn't move, fear rooting me in place. A badge slid under the door, glinting in the faint light. I grabbed it, my hands shaking, and read the name. Officer Wesley. Slowly, I opened the door, shielding Alice and Jennifer behind me. Wesley stood there, calm, her eyes scanning the room. "Scary when alarms go off, huh?" she said, almost dismissive. "Next time, answer the phone so the alarm company knows it's okay." I stared, confused. "We didn't set it off," I stammered, tears spilling. "We didn't open any doors." Her face shifted, a flicker of concern. "Then who made those footprints?" I followed her gaze. Muddy footprints trailed from the glass door in the nook across the kitchen to the pantry, then out the front door, still ajar. Before the pantry, the prints clustered, as if someone had paced, deliberating. He was right there, I collapsed sobbing as Wesley's partner whispered about a pried-open door. Jason and Janelle returned, their faces oddly calm, as if the night's terror was expected. The police walked me home, my parents' anger mixing with fear. Years later, I learned the truth. Jason hadn't gone to prison for tax evasion, but for drug running, a kingpin caught in a high-speed chase. That night, someone, a rival, a debtor, had come for him, and we were caught in the crossfire. He knew. I was there, in that pink shirt. The memory lingers, a shadow in every ring of a phone, a reminder that safety is a fragile lie. The darkness in that kitchen felt alive, pressing against me as I crouched, my heart pounding so loud I swore they could hear it. I was 16, trapped in Lisa's sprawling mansion, when a beam of light sliced through the blinds, pinning me like a moth under glass. You can almost feel the glass trembling under their fists now. The suffocating silence of the forest, the betrayal of a night meant for laughter, the moment when safety shattered. That was the night I learned how a house of wealth could become a cage, how a single light could summon terror from the shadows. It was supposed to be a perfect night. At 16, I lived for sleepovers at Lisa's house, a mansion tucked deep in a forest beside our high school. Lisa, Zoe, and I were inseparable, and her home was our playground, a labyrinth of polished floors, towering windows, and rooms that echoed with our laughter. Her mother was away that night, leaving us free to sprawl in the living room with popcorn and horror movies. Anna, Lisa's younger sister, tagged along, her wide eyes gleaming with excitement. We slipped into pajamas, the air buzzing with the thrill of being unsupervised. The house felt invincible, its grandeur a shield against the world. Outside, the forest loomed, its trees swallowing the starlight. But inside, we were untouchable, lost in the glow of the TV screen and the comfort of friendship. Then, the night turned. A piercing wail cut through our giggles. The house's alarm, a sound that froze us in place. Lisa shrugged it off, saying it happened sometimes, and darted to the control panel to silence it. We laughed nervously, blaming a raccoon or the wind, but the air felt heavier now, the movie's screams too real. 10 minutes later, the alarm blared again, its shriek rattling the walls. My stomach twisted. Lisa's house had a state-of-the-art system, calibrated to detect humans, not animals. We exchanged uneasy glances, the fun draining from the room. "Let's check," Zoe said, her voice tight. We crept upstairs, flipping on every light, peering through windows into the garden below. The forest stared back, its blackness unbroken, the pool's surface still as glass. Nothing moved, yet the silence felt like a lie, as if the trees were holding their breath. Fear crept in, a cold weight settling in my chest. We ventured onto the balcony, the night air biting my skin. The alarm sounded again, and the pool's automatic lights flared, bathing the garden in a sterile glow. Something was out there, circling the house, triggering the sensors. I dropped to my knees, my breath shallow, hiding behind the railing as Lisa silenced the alarm. Back inside, we killed every light, the house plunging into shadow. We huddled. In the kitchen, a cavern of marble and glass, its floor icy under my bare feet. Without thinking, we left our phones upstairs, a mistake that haunted me later. The darkness was suffocating, the forest's presence seeping through the walls. Then, the alarm erupted again, a relentless cry that shook my nerves. Anna's small sob broke the silence, and Lisa pulled her upstairs to disable the system for good, leaving Zoe and me alone in the kitchen's gloom. We stood frozen, eyes darting to the windows, where moonlight barely pierced the Venetian blinds. A sound broke the stillness. Quick, deliberate footsteps in the garden just beyond the wall. They weren't cautious, but purposeful, as if someone knew exactly where they were going. My heart raced, every nerve screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. A shadow passed the glass door, tall and indistinct, followed by a beam of light that cut through the blinds, blinding us. Zoe gasped, her hand gripping mine as the light held us unyielding like a predator's stare. Voices murmured outside, low and urgent, too muffled to understand. The glass rattled under a sudden blow, a fist pounding with savage intent. I lunged for the door, my small frame bracing the handle, my body trembling as the blows grew harder, the blinds shaking with each strike. Zoe stood paralyzed, her eyes wide with terror as another set of fists hammered the front door, the house groaning under the assault. Time blurred, each second a lifetime of dread. I clung to the handle, my knuckles white, praying the glass would hold. The front door's assault stopped, a fleeting relief, but the shadow outside our door redoubled its efforts, the wood creaking under the strain. Then, as suddenly as it began, the blows ceased, the light vanishing into the night. We collapsed onto the floor, breathless, the silence now a cruel trick. Hours later, dawn broke, and Lisa's mother returned, her face paling as we recounted the night. She called. The police, who found muddy footprints circling the house, scuff marks on the front door, and signs of forced entry attempts. They called it a robbery gone wrong, common in a neighborhood of lavish homes, but their words rang hollow. Why did they turn violent when they saw us? Why didn't they flee? The questions gnawed at me, each one a splinter in my mind. I never returned to Lisa's house, the memory of that light too raw, too real. Lisa didn't understand, her distance a quiet wound, but I couldn't face those windows again, knowing what waited in the dark. When I was 8, our little house felt like a castle, but the night would soon prove it was a cage. We called it the shack, a cramped place my mom moved me and my sister into after her split with Dad. Money was tight, and we shared a tiny bedroom, but the backyard was our kingdom, a sprawling space with a big above-ground pool, and a deck where we'd splash and laugh. A tall privacy fence circled it, a wooden wall that promised safety but hid eyes I couldn't see. As a nosy kid, I'd climb the fence's planks daily, peering into the neighbor's yard. 2 boys from my school lived there, their chatter, a comfort through the slats. Their Uncle Randy was always around, his smile warm, his voice kind. We'd talk for hours, my sister and I perched on the fence, the summer sun baking our skin. It felt safe, like family. But the night was waiting to show me how wrong I was. Randy was in his 20s or 30s, always tinkering in the backyard, a constant in our summer days. His easy laugh and casual stories made him feel like an older brother. But looking back, shadows hid in his eyes. My sister and I would lean over the fence, trading jokes with him and the boys, the pool's ripples glinting behind us. Those moments felt pure, but something was off. A thread I was too young to pull. One day, a basketball sailed over the fence, landing in our yard. We offered to toss it back, but Randy vaulted over with ease, his movements swift, almost practiced. I thought nothing of it then, but now I see it. A test, a predator mapping his path. Everything changed when my sister, in a careless moment, mentioned Mom's night shifts, leaving us alone in the shack. Randy's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened, a glint I didn't understand. That slip of words was a key, unlocking something dark I couldn't yet name. My grandma's old warning echoed faintly. She'd told us of a neighbor who turned on his own, a betrayal that left scars. I brushed it off, clinging to the warmth of those backyard talks. But the air felt heavier now, the fence less a shield and more a veil. Randy knew our secret. and the night was ready to claim its due. One night, the darkness tore through our home, and I slept through its claws. I woke to my sister's sobs, her silhouette against the wall, phone pressed to her ear in our bunk, bed's dim glow. I was on the bottom, groggy, asking what was wrong, but her trembling voice told me to sleep, hiding the terror I couldn't grasp. Morning revealed the truth, a nightmare I'd missed. While Mom worked the night shift, Randy had scaled the fence, his shadow stalking our house. He'd pounded on my sister's window, demanding she let him in, his voice a low growl through the glass. She refused, but he circled the shack, hammering windows, rattling doors, a relentless force against our fragile walls. She'd called 911, her hands shaking as I slept, oblivious to the chaos inches away. By the time police arrived, Randy was back in his yard, the fence his alibi, his denial smooth as the night. They could prove nothing, leaving us with only fear. My sister's eyes were hollow, her trust shattered, and Mom, unable to change her shifts, sent us to Dad's at night. My grandma's story rang louder, a neighbor's betrayal, a family broken. Years passed, the incident a scar we buried, believing the danger gone. But the shack held its memories, and the fence was no barrier to what waited in the dark. Years later, I'd stopped climbing the fence, the boys' voices a distant memory. My sister, now older, hosted a sleepover, the shack alive with laughter, until the night turned predator. They gathered by the couch, board games scattered, the sliding glass door to the backyard framed by vertical blinds. One blind was broken, a gap exposing us to the dark, a vulnerability we'd ignored. As they played, a friend froze, her face pale, whispering, "There's a man at the glass door." They turned, and there was Randy, his face pressed to the glass, eyes glinting through the gap, watching them like prey. Panic erupted, their screams piercing the night as my sister dialed 911 again. I slept through it, lost in a child's deep slumber, unaware of the terror unfolding. Randy's stare was a violation, his presence a betrayal of the trust we'd once given. The police came, but he'd leapt the fence, answering their knock in the same clothes, his lies unshaken. Once again, they could do nothing, the night shielding him as it had before. The shack, our home, felt like a trap, its walls too thin to keep him out. That second night broke us, and we fought back. Mom moved us out, the shack abandoned, and we won a restraining order when Randy skipped court, his absence a hollow victory. I never saw him again, but his shadow lingers, a ghost, in my mind. Years later, I learned he's in prison, locked away for crimes that don't surprise me. But the fear he planted never left, a seed that grows in the dark. My grandma's story feels like prophecy now, a neighbor's betrayal, a wound that doesn't heal. The shack, the fence, Randy's eyes, they haunt my dreams, a reminder that safety is a lie. I'm older now, but I check locks, scan shadows, always waiting for another face at the glass. The night can turn on you, even in your own home, and trust is a luxury I can't afford. My sister carries it too, her silence louder than words. We survived, but the shack's walls still whisper of what might have been, and I'll never feel safe again. The night was a living thing, pressing against my car as I drove through the empty streets. I was a delivery driver, chasing extra cash in the small hours, my dashboard clock glowing 11 p.m. The town slept, but I was awake, hunting for one last order to make the night worthwhile. When the app pinged with a $20 tip for a 15-minute drive, I snatched it up, blind to the trap waiting in the darkness. The road led me to a place where no one should have been, where a single flame would beckon me into terror. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of pine and damp asphalt, as I followed the GPS. The streets gave way to narrower roads, then to a gravel path winding into a forest I didn't know existed. My headlights flickered over dense trees, their branches clawing at the sky, the world shrinking to the beam ahead. I checked the address again, my brow furrowing. Who orders food out here? The path ended at a gate, 2 stone pillars with a chain dangling loose, inviting me in. I eased through, the gravel crunching under my tires, and pulled into a small parking area. A faded sign caught my light. Forest Preserve. My stomach twisted. A preserve? At this hour? I delivered to parks before, but never this late. Never to a place so wrong. The lot was empty, the darkness swallowing everything beyond my headlights. I parked, the engine's hum the only sound, and checked the app. The customers. Note was brief. Meet at campfire down the trail. My phone rang, the sudden chime jarring. I answered, my voice hesitant. Hello? A man's voice came through, deep and gravelly, like stones grinding together. Saw you parked. Can you see me? I'm camping with buddies, look for the fire. I squinted into the night, seeing nothing but trees. I don't see anything, I said, unease creeping in. It's just down the trail, he insisted, his tone too eager. You'll spot the flame. Bring the food. I hesitated. I thought preserves closed at night. This one allows. Camping sometimes, he said too quickly. You're good. His words didn't sit right, but the tip was too good to pass up. I grabbed the food bag, locked the car, and stepped onto the trail, using my phone's flashlight to guide me. The forest was alive with whispers. Wind through leaves, distant crickets, my own footsteps on the dirt. I expected laughter, voices, the hum of a campsite, but there was nothing, just silence, heavy and watchful. Then I saw it, a faint orange glow flickering through the trees, not on the trail but deep in the woods, far from any path. Why so far out? My pulse quickened, but I pressed on, weaving through underbrush, branches snagging my jacket. The glow grew brighter, a small campfire burning in a clearing. I slowed, my breath shallow. No tents, no chairs, no signs of life. Just the fire, alone, its flames dancing in the dark. This isn't right. I stood frozen, the food bag heavy in my hand, my flashlight sweeping the shadows. The forest felt alive, its eyes on me, waiting. A twig snapped sharp and close. My head whipped toward the sound, my light catching nothing but trees. Someone was there, hidden, still. He's watching. Fear surged, a primal instinct screaming to run. Hey, I'm the delivery driver, I called, my voice trembling. I'll leave the food here. I set the bag down, my eyes darting, and backed away. Then, movement. A tall figure stepped from the darkness, his face half lit by the fire. Dark hair, scruffy beard, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't see you coming, he said. His voice the same gravelly growl from the phone. He moved closer, too fast. His smile widening, unnatural, predatory. I stumbled back, words catching in my throat. It's there, I managed, pointing to the bag. He kept coming, his steps deliberate, the fire casting shadows across his face. Panic took over. I turned and ran, branches tearing at my skin, my flashlight bouncing wildly. His voice chased me, too calm, too sweet. Come back, I've got cash for you. I didn't stop, my lungs burning as I sprinted to the lot. My car was there, a beacon in the dark. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and dove inside, slamming the lock. The engine roared to life and I swung toward the gate, then froze. The chain was up, stretched tight across the pillars, locking me in. He did this. My heart pounded, my eyes locked on the chain, calculating. Footsteps approached, heavy, unhurried, from behind. I didn't look. I floored it, veering onto the grass, the car lurching as I squeezed past the pillars, inches from the ditch. The gravel path blurred beneath me as I sped away, my breath ragged. The forest swallowed the fire's glow, but his presence lingered. A weight in my chest. I didn't call the police, stupid maybe, but I knew he'd be gone. The next morning I searched online. The preserve closed at 8:12 p.m. No camping allowed, no fires permitted. He lied. It was a trap. The truth settled like ice in my veins. What did he want? The question haunts me. A shadow in every delivery, a flicker in every flame. I drive on, but the forest is never far behind. That's the terror I lived through one night at the data center where I worked, a memory that still haunts the edges of my dreams. My job was simple. Stationed in a small warehouse-turned-office, I monitored a bank of screens, ensuring the systems stayed online. If something went down, I'd head to the operating rooms for a quick restart. It was an easy gig, especially since I worked the overnight shift alone. Free to do whatever I wanted as long as I kept an eye on the systems. The building sat at the end of a long, desolate road, backed by a dense thicket of trees that seemed to swallow the world beyond. No cars, no people, just me, the hum of servers, and the occasional flicker of a monitor in the dark. The job was monotonous, the kind of work that could drive you to the brink of boredom. By the time this night rolled around, I'd already considered quitting more times than I could count, the endless hours of solitude wearing on me. But I forced myself to stick with it. The steady paycheck a tether I couldn't afford to cut. That night I arrived at my usual 10 p.m., the sky a deep indigo, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. I parked in the empty lot, the gravel crunching under my tires, and headed inside. The building looming like a silent sentinel against the tree line. The office was a small, sterile room on the upper floor, its walls lined with monitors that glowed with streams of data. I settled into my chair, the familiar creak of its springs a small comfort, and ran a quick check on the systems. Everything was green as expected. Overnight shifts rarely saw issues. The load on the servers light in the early hours. With my duties done, I pulled out my laptop, eager to dive into a Netflix show I'd been binging all week. The glow of the screen a welcome distraction in the quiet. The warehouse was a cavernous space, its vastness amplified by the stillness. The night, the systems were reliable. Outages a rare occurrence, maybe twice a week. A single system would go down, an easy fix with a quick reboot. I'd gotten through 2 episodes of my show, the hours slipping by unnoticed, when a sharp alert on the monitor snapped me out of my trance. One of the systems had lost connection, the notification blinking red against the dark screen. I paused the show, my heart giving a small jolt, not from fear, but from the sudden break in routine. I stood, stretching my stiff limbs, and made my way downstairs, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the concrete walls. The corridors were a labyrinth, their twists and turns leading to the main hub of the data center, a massive storage room filled with towering rows of servers, their blinking lights a constellation of technology in the gloom. The notification had given me a row and section number, guiding me to the far corner of the room, the last aisle in the darkest part of the space. I navigated the aisles, the hum of the servers a constant drone in my ears, until I reached the designated section. What I found sent a ripple of unease through me. The main power cable was unplugged, lying on the floor like a discarded snake, its end frayed as if it had been yanked free. In all my years at the job, I'd never seen a heavy-duty cable come loose like that. It just didn't happen. My mind raced for an explanation, but none felt right. Had it been pulled, or had it somehow worked itself free over time? I shook off the thought, focusing on the task at hand. I plugged the cable back in, the system humming to life as I rebooted it. The monitor screens flickering back to green. Everything seemed fine, but the unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. I told myself it was a fluke, that maybe the cable had slowly loosened over months and finally given way tonight. I did a quick sweep of the other aisles, my footsteps echoing in the vast room, but found nothing else out of place. Satisfied, I started back toward the office, the corridors stretching endlessly before me, their dim lights casting long shadows that seemed to shift with every step. As I walked through one of the corridors, a strange sound stopped me in my tracks. It was a deep, resonant thud, like a heavy door closing somewhere in the distance. The sound was jarring, a stark contrast to the usual silence of the building, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't know the full layout of the warehouse. Its sprawling design was a mystery beyond the paths I usually took, so I couldn't pinpoint where the sound had come from. Might have been a door, but it could just as easily have been the metal pipes in the walls, bending under pressure, a common occurrence in a place this old. Yet this sound was different, unfamiliar, and it set my nerves on edge. You've felt this before, haven't you? That moment when the ordinary becomes a puzzle, and every shadow holds a threat. I pushed the thought aside, returning to the office, my heart beating a little faster than before. I double-checked the systems, still green, and resumed my show. The characters' voices a thin shield against the growing unease. But only a few minutes passed, barely enough time to get through a single scene, when another sound jolted me upright. It was the faint patter of footsteps, quick and purposeful, echoing through the corridor just outside my office. My heart leapt into my throat. The sound so close it felt like someone was right outside my door. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and opened the door, peering into the hallway. The corridor stretched out before me, empty and silent, its far end marked by a single door. Nothing was there, but the sound had been unmistakable. A hurried scurry that spoke of movement, of presence. I knew I wouldn't be able to focus until I checked. The thought of someone, or something lurking in the building too unsettling to ignore. I walked to the end of the corridor, my footsteps tentative, and opened the door, peering into the next hallway. What I saw sent my pulse racing. The door at the far end was just closing, its motion slow and deliberate, as if someone had slipped through it moments before. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear in my chest, as I cautiously approached, my hand trembling as I pushed the door open. This hallway was lined with office doors, their windows dark, their contents hidden in shadow. "Is someone in here?" I called, my voice echoing through the corridor, each hello a desperate plea for an answer. The silence that followed was oppressive, a weight that pressed against my ears, broken only by the faint hum of the building's systems. Were they hiding in one of these rooms waiting for me to pass? The thought sent a chill through me, my instincts screaming to retreat. I took a step back toward the door, my decision made, when a door beside me flew open, revealing a nightmare in motion. A man burst from the unlit room, his figure a blur of shadow as he charged toward me. I didn't think, I ran, my feet pounding against the floor as I raced through the corridor, his footsteps echoing behind me, a relentless pursuit that fueled my terror. I darted into the staircase, the fire exit door my only hope, and burst into the parking lot, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I fumbled for my phone as I reached my car, my hands shaking as I called the police, my voice a frantic whisper as I explained what had happened. The man didn't follow me out the same exit, his presence a ghost that had vanished into the night. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights a stark contrast to the darkness, and searched the building for nearly half an hour, but he was gone, likely escaping through another exit into the woods behind the warehouse, a shadow swallowed by the trees. His presence explained the unplugged cable. He must have bumped it while sneaking through the storage room. A careless mistake that had tipped me off. The company launched a full investigation, reviewing security footage, trying to piece together how he'd gotten in and whether he'd taken anything. I wasn't authorized to know the details, but one thing was clear. He hadn't wanted me to see him, and whatever he'd planned to do to keep his secret, I was lucky to escape before finding out. Imagine the weight of that unknown, the way it lingers, a shadow that never fully fades. The silence of that night was a lie, broken by a chime that still echoes in my nightmares. I was alone in the pizza shop, the hum of the fridge my only company, when I felt it, a prickling certainty that I wasn't alone. You can almost hear. The silence before the blade appeared now, the empty glow of the dining room, the false safety of a routine shift, the moment when a familiar place became a trap. That was the night I learned how a single sound could summon a monster, how a quiet Tuesday could end in terror. I worked the graveyard shift at a small pizza shop, a 24/7 joint that drew late-night stragglers and the occasional drunk. The food wasn't great, but the hours suited me, and I liked the solitude. Working alone meant I could blast music, scroll my phone, or just soak in the quiet while waiting for orders. That Tuesday, I clocked in at 9:01 p.m., taking over from the day manager with a nod. The shop was a familiar bubble, fluorescent lights, buzzing, the scent of dough and grease hanging heavy, tables wiped clean in the dining area. It was a slow night, perfect for easing into my routine. I prepped the workstations, restocking sauce jars and checking the ovens, my movements automatic after months on the job. The world outside was dark, the sidewalk empty, the parking lot a void beyond the glass doors. I settled into the kitchen, ready for a long, uneventful shift. Then the night shifted. A sharp chime cut through the quiet, the bell above the front door signaling a customer. I set down my phone and walked to the counter, expecting a tired trucker or a giggling teen. But the dining room was empty, its tables gleaming under the harsh lights. I frowned, scanning every corner, half expecting someone to pop out as a prank. Nothing. A smile tugged at my lips. Maybe I'd imagined it, my brain playing tricks after too many late nights. I checked the door, its bolt still locked, and returned to the kitchen, brushing it off as a fluke. But 15 minutes later, the chime sounded again, clear and deliberate. This time, I was sure I'd heard it. No video or music to muddy my senses. I strode to the front, my steps quick, but found the same empty room, the same unbroken silence outside. My pulse quickened, a faint unease settling in my chest. I jiggled the door handle, testing its mechanism, but it held firm, the bell silent, under my touch. The unease grew, a cold weight I couldn't shake. I lingered in the dining room, eyes darting to the windows where the night pressed against the glass like a living thing. No cars, no footsteps, just the shop's hum and my own breathing. Half an hour passed, each minute stretching longer, the quiet now oppressive. I forced myself back to the kitchen, scrolling my phone to drown out the tension, but my ears strained for any sound. Then the bell chimed again, sharp and mocking, as if taunting me. I froze, my heart lurching. This time I didn't move, just called out, "Is someone there?" My voice echoed unanswered, the shop's emptiness a cruel reply. I tried to laugh it off, blaming a faulty sensor or my own paranoia, but the air felt heavier, charged with a presence I couldn't see. I stayed in the kitchen, my focus split between my phone and the doorway, waiting for the night to prove me wrong. By 4 a.m., the shift's end loomed, and I busied myself with closing tasks, counting the register's meager earnings. The routine grounded me, but a nagging sense of being watched clung to my skin. I glanced over my shoulder, the kitchen's shadows deeper than before, the dining room's glow too stark. Then, a heavy footfall landed behind me, deliberate like a boot on tile. My breath caught, my body spinning to face the sound. There he was, a man, inches away, his black hoodie shrouding his face, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. In his hand, a knife gleamed, its blade clutched so tightly his knuckles shone white. Time stopped, the world narrowing to those eyes. That blade, the raw menace radiating from him. "Hey, listen," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Take the cash, I won't say anything." He didn't move, his stare unyielding, unhuman, as if he saw something beyond me. Instinct took over. The counter was my only barrier, its L shape, forcing me to move toward him to escape. I lunged, diving over the counter, my body crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I scrambled up, the man's footsteps thundering behind me. His face twisted with rage, the knife slashing the air as he charged. I sprinted for the door, shoving it open, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. He was right behind, his breath ragged, his boots pounding the pavement. I ran, legs burning, toward the road, praying for a passing car. At some point he stopped. I didn't know when, too focused on survival to look back. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911. My voice a broken gasp as I waited by the roadside. The shop's lights a distant beacon. The police arrived in minutes, their flashlights sweeping the shop. Inside was chaos, tables overturned, the register smashed, the walls scarred with knife marks. My car, parked out back, bore jagged scratches along its side, a final act of spite. The man was gone, vanished into the night, leaving no trace but destruction. The officers pieced it together. He'd likely watched me from outside, ringing the bell to lure me out, slipping in during my checks. That hour of silence before he appeared, he was already inside, hiding, waiting. The thought chilled me, a violation deeper than the attack. I quit soon after, unable to face the shop's empty glow, terrified he'd return. His red eyes burned into my memory. Even now I hear that bell in my dreams, a warning that safety is a lie, that any night can hide a blade. In the dead of night, the pizza shop was my world, a fluorescent-lit island in a sea of darkness. I worked the graveyard shift at a small 24/7 joint, the kind where the food wasn't great but drew late-night stragglers craving a cheap slice. At 9:00 p.m., I took over, the day manager's footsteps fading as I prepped the counters. The empty tables stared back, the hum of the oven my only company, promising a quiet night. Tuesdays were slow, the streets outside deserted, the neon, open sign casting a lonely glow on the sidewalk. I settled into the routine, scrolling my phone in the back, the scent of dough and grease a familiar comfort. But even then, a prickle of unease lingered, like the night was holding its breath. My coworker's story echoed faintly. She'd warned of a rowdy group who'd trashed a shop nearby, their laughter masking something darker. I shook it off, blaming the late hour, but the silence felt heavy. The shop's glass doors too thin, against whatever waited outside. This was just another shift, I told myself, but the night had plans I couldn't see. Around 1 a.m., the door chimed, shattering the stillness. 3 men stumbled in, their laughter loud, slurred, reeking of whiskey and trouble. Their eyes were glassy, movements unsteady. but there was an edge to them, a sharpness beneath the drunken haze. They weren't here for pizza. They were here for chaos. I stepped to the counter, forcing a smile, asking what they wanted. The tallest one, his shirt stained, leaned forward, demanding free food, claiming they were regulars. I'd never seen them before, and their grins felt like masks hiding something I didn't want to name. I explained we couldn't give freebies, keeping my voice calm, but their laughter turned cold, their stares pinning me like prey. "You'll regret that," the shortest one muttered, his words a blade in the air. They lingered, pacing the dining area, kicking chairs, their voices rising in a mocking chant. My co-worker's story roared back, a shop trashed, a worker cornered, the night turning feral. I told myself to stay steady, to keep them talking, but my hands trembled as I pretended to prep an order. They weren't leaving, and the shop was no longer mine. The glass doors reflected their shadows, the street outside empty, no help in sight. This wasn't a prank. They wanted something, and I was alone with their intent. The men didn't order, didn't sit, just prowled the shop, their voices a low growl of insults and laughter. One knocked over a stack of menus, another slammed a fist on a table, the E sound echoing like a warning. I stayed behind the counter, heart pounding, trying to gauge their next move. They were testing me, pushing to see how far they could go. The leader, the tall one, leaned close, his breath sour, taunting me for refusing them. "You think you're safe back there?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. I gripped the counter, my only barrier, forcing a neutral reply, but fear coiled in my chest. "You're in control," I lied to myself, but the shop felt smaller, the walls closing in. My co-worker's story screamed in my mind. Her friend trapped in a shop, the customers turning violent. The night was alive, and it wasn't on my side. The men spread out, one lingering by the door, another near the back exit, their movements coordinated, deliberate. Were they planning something worse than a tantrum? The clock ticked past 2 a.m., the world outside asleep, my phone too far to reach. The shop was a trap, and I was the prey, waiting for their next move. I scanned for an escape, the glass doors mocking me with their fragility. Then the air snapped and chaos erupted. The leader grabbed a chair, hurling it against a table, the crash shattering the tension. The others joined, kicking over trash cans, smashing plates from a display, their laughter a feral howl. I backed against the wall, heart racing, as they tore through the shop, their rage a storm I couldn't stop. "You should have given us the food," the short one roared, his face twisted, no longer drunk but unhinged. I fumbled for the phone under the counter, dialing 911, my voice a whisper as I begged for help. They saw me and the leader lunged, his fist grazing the counter as I ducked. "Run now," my mind screamed, but the back exit was blocked, the front doors too close to them. I grabbed a pizza cutter, its dull blade a pathetic shield, and shouted for them to leave. Their eyes locked on me, predators sensing weakness, and the tall one charged, knocking over the register. I sprinted for the front, weaving through debris, their footsteps heavy behind me. My co-worker's story was here, a worker cornered, barely escaping. I burst onto the sidewalk, the cold air biting, and ran down the street, their yells fading as I hid behind a dumpster. The shop's lights glowed in the distance, a beacon of my failure, now their domain. Police sirens wailed, arriving too late. The men were gone, the shop a wreck of broken glass and scattered dough. The police found me shivering, the shop a ruin, its counters scarred, tables upended. They searched, but the men had vanished, shadows swallowed by the night. I described their faces, their rage, but the trail was cold, the street cameras too grainy. The shop was my fault, I thought, for not giving in. for standing my ground. My co-worker's story haunted me. Her friend quit, never returning, the fear too deep. I didn't last long either. Each shift a reminder of those eyes, that chaos waiting to return. Now I see them in every late-night shadow, their laughter echoing in my dreams. The shop's wreckage was rebuilt, but my sense of safety wasn't. The night can turn feral, even in a place you know, and I'll never trust it again. I check the news, half expecting their faces, wondering if they'll come for another shop, another worker. That ordinary night broke me, and I'm still running from its echoes.